Chapter 733. Ji Lingxi's improvement in cultivation base was completely unreasonable. A few days ago she was only slightly beyond the Dao realm, but now she had completely stabilized her cultivation base. During her sparring session with Yun Yang, her aura had unexpectedly experienced an explosive growth. Yun Yang was very familiar with this sudden aura because it was an aura that would only erupt when one's cultivation base had a breakthrough and was not under control. Another breakthrough. This meant that Ji Lingxi had taken another step forward on the unknown path of an advanced cultivation base. The gap between the two of them was visible to the naked eye. Faced with the reality of an even greater gap, Yun Yang was dumbfounded and speechless. What was going on? This was an unbelievable and incomprehensible form of cheating. What cultivation method are you cultivating? Is it convenient for you to reveal it? Yun Yang asked with a frown. Yes, Phoenix. No. Ji Lingxi was halfway through her answer when a hint of confusion appeared on her face. I don't think I am now. The cultivation method I'm cultivating now seems to be called the Nine Heavens Mantra. I don't know what's going on either. Yun Yang pursed his lips. Changing one's basic cultivation method is a huge taboo in cultivation. Forget it, that's not important. But you don't even know your own cultivation method. What's going on? I've never cultivated this cultivation method before. It really only appeared recently, like it appeared out of thin air, but it feels like I've been cultivating it for a long time. It's as if I've been cultivating it for a long time. There are no obstacles at all. Everything is so smooth like it's made by God. Ji Lingxi replied in a daze. Yun Yang was speechless for a good while. This matter, why did it sound so mysterious? Now that I think about it, there must be a huge problem with my birth. Ji Lingxi sighed. I don't know what kind of existence my seemingly unreliable father is. This cultivation method of mine should be something imprinted in my memory, but I really don't have the slightest bit of knowledge about these things. Yun Yang nodded and said, It doesn't matter. It's fine as long as there's no harm. He sighed inwardly. How could he even explain it? Ji Lingxi did not even know the cultivation method she was cultivating, but she was advancing at such a rapid pace. He knew everything clearly, but he couldn't catch up no matter how hard he tried. Ji Lingxi gritted her teeth and said, Throughout the ages, I've never seen a father who cheated a girl like this. When I find him, I will pull out all his hair and beard. I'm so angry. The more he spoke, the angrier he became. He stamped his feet and said, I'm so angry, I'm so angry. That old bastard, I really want to stab him now. Yun Yang coughed, exasperated. A sudden impulse rose within him and he could not help saying, When you plan to beat him up, count me in. During this period of time he was tormented by the red light to the point where he wished he was dead. It was impossible for Yun Yang to say that he did not have any complaints after going through so many life and death situations. Coupled with the resentment of using cheats instead of risking his life, he really wanted to beat that old bastard up. What kind of father are you? Ji Lingxi nodded in agreement. Let's beat him up together when we find him. Yun Yang scratched his head and said, If you beat him up, he probably won't dare to retaliate. That's family happiness, but I'm his son-in-law. It's not right to do this, it's treacherous. Ji Lingxi was stunned when she heard him. Her face and ears reddened as she said, Shameless. Whose son-in-law are you? She lifted her head and turned to leave. Yun Yang coughed. I'm going to the front line to take a look. Are you coming? Ji Lingxi turned around at once, her eyes gleaming. When? When the 10 Yama kings return, I'll depart. Are you coming? Yun Yang answered. I'll go with you. Ji Lingxi decided immediately. After a pause she said, Sister Lingxiu, let's ask her to come as well. During this period of time, Ji Lingxi and Shangguan Lingxiu's relationship had improved by leaps and bounds. There was no doubt that Shangguan Lingxiu was a very, very good girl. Whether it was her personality or the way she conducted herself, she was magnanimous, gentle, kind, considerate of the bigger picture, and loyal. The strength in her bones, in particular, was evident and commendable. To any man who knew her well, this kind of woman was a priceless treasure that was worth cherishing. Even Ji Lingxi, who was also a woman and a rival in love, was full of admiration for Shangguan Lingxiu. Ji Lingxi's psychological journey toward Shangguan Lingxiu was full of twists and turns. From admiration at the beginning, to getting close to her, to being extremely close to her, to realizing that she had fallen in love with the same man with such an outstanding person. However, she could not bring herself to hate or resent her. She kept a small distance, but it did not take long for her to get closer again. Gradually she began to tolerate her, and as they got to know each other better, she grew to admire and like her even more. Finally, she realized that living together was not something unacceptable. In the end, Ji Lingxi had gained a bestie who was almost as good as Yu Rulan. Ji Lingxi was a woman as well. She had the heart of a girl who wanted to monopolize her lover and would not allow anyone else to share, but she was helpless when the time came. She did not know when the red glow on her would disappear or become ineffective. What was the point of forcefully occupying Yunyang and not letting any other woman get close to her? What good could come of it? The relationship between people needed to be tempered and cultivated. If she persisted for a long time, the final result would only be to force Yunyang to drift further away from her or even leave her forever. If it really came to that, she would not even be able to maintain her basic identity and status. That would be asking for trouble. Instead of going to such extremes, it was better for her to take a step back first and let Yunyang be touched by her sacrifice. This was not playing petty tricks, but the wisdom of one's way of interacting with others. Perhaps it could be said to be a little cunning of a girl. If she wanted to have him for a long time, why not take a step back first? As long as she did not lose the momentum, the advantages would outweigh the disadvantages. Shengguan Lingxiu had undoubtedly fulfilled all the basic conditions for Ji Lingxi to take a step back. It could even be said that Shengguan Lingxiu's existence had, to a certain extent, helped her avert the most awkward situation. With Shengguan Lingxiu at the forefront, she was protecting both of their interests. Therefore, this could be considered a good thing. Every time she thought about it, she could not help but feel embarrassed, angry, and helpless at the same time. Her anger towards her father, whom she had never met, grew to a whole new level. Other fathers love their daughters meticulously. What you're doing? Although it's also meticulous, it's too meticulous. I understand that you're doing this to protect your daughter. There's no doubt that you're doing this with good intentions. There's nothing wrong with that, but there must be a limit to everything, no? Once things are handled too excessively, it'll be too extreme. Although I won't go as far as to give myself up before we get married. Will I be severely injured with just a touch? Will I die with just a touch? Will any man in this world be able to endure such a thing? Which hero can endure a woman like this for a long time? It was only because Yun Yang's skin was thick and his recovery ability was astonishing. If it were someone else, he might have died 100 times over. Chapter 734. It was not an exaggeration at all. Had it not been for Yun Yang, it would have been a conservative estimate of 1,000 to 800 rounds, let alone 180 rounds. This world had always been a place where men were superior to women. It was common for men to have multiple wives and concubines. Now Yun Yang had placed a restriction on his daughter that would kill anyone who touched it. Did he want his daughter to be a bachelor for the rest of her life? At least, based on the current situation, it could not be removed within a short period of time. Did she really have to watch the man she liked become someone else's husband? How many years would she have to wait for the red light to disappear before she could take him back? By then, this man would probably already have many wives and concubines by his side. Would she, the first wife, have to be the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth wife? Perhaps by then this man would already be dead. Are you trying to get me killed? I really don't know what that old thing is thinking. Ji Lingxi thought hatefully, her teeth grinding loudly. Luckily, I still have Shengguan Lingxiu on my side. It's also because of family issues that I don't dare to step out of the relationship between a man and a woman. It's really temporary for him and it's going to be resolved soon. As for me, it's going to be for the rest of my life. What an old bastard. Sigh. Yun Yang waited for a day, but the 10 kings had yet to return. Amidst his thoughts, he heaved a rare sigh. It's time for the 9 supremes to unite, Yun Yang said quietly. It looks like all of you won't be coming back. As Supreme Cloud, I won't ignore the war, but the 9 supremes can't be involved in everything either. When I'm done with the matters here in the capital, I'll go to the front line to take a look. Don't worry. Everything will be carried out according to plan. I am Supreme Cloud, Yutang Supreme Cloud, forever. Actually, I've never wanted to take this step. But I can't do it now. Yun Yang walked out of his room in a purple robe. Ji Lingxi was cultivating under the flowering tree in the yard. She had long felt that cultivating in Yun Yang's small yard was much more efficient than anywhere else. In the yard, especially under the flowering tree, the effect was more than twice that of other places. Although Ji Lingxi did not understand why, she still subconsciously chose this place to cultivate whenever she wanted to. For a martial artist, nothing was more important than improving their strength. Just as he was cultivating, he saw Yun Yang walk out of his room with a solemn expression. His aura exuded an indescribable sense of sorrow and oppression. He couldn't help asking, "Where are you going?" For some reason, Ji Lingxi felt an inexplicable ripple in her heart. She could vaguely feel that the place Yun-yang was about to go to was closely related to her. The feeling was inexplicable, but it was strangely real. With this thought in mind, he blurted out without hesitation, "Can I go with you?" Yun-yang thought about it and shook his head decisively. No. She did not expect Yun-yang to reject her. She murmured in disappointment, "Why?" Yun-yang said faintly, "There are some places that only I can enter." Ji Lingxi snorted and turned back to her room in a huff. When Yun-yang went out, he followed him quietly. "I don't believe that you'll be able to leave me behind with my current level of cultivation and power." However, after Yun-yang left the house, he really disappeared after turning a corner. When Ji Lingxi chased after him, there was no trace of him left. Ji Lingxi stomped her feet in frustration. "Damn it, I forgot that this bastard has the art of transformation." She lifted her head to look at the clouds in the sky, her expression conflicted. Which one is it? Is it the one that looks like a rabbit, or is it the one that looks like a bear? Sigh, some things really couldn't be done as one wished with a high cultivation base. Unless one's cultivation base was high enough, so high that no one or thing could be beyond one's control, otherwise just like these clouds. What the hell are these things? The residence of 9 Supremes. The 9 Supremes, which had not been seen for a long time, stood in silence as usual. Yun-yang transformed into a cloud and hovered in midair, observing the formation that was shrouded in clouds and mist for a long time. At this moment, the clouds that flashed through his eyes were like the clouds that he himself had transformed into, passing by leisurely. This time he stayed outside the residence of 9 Supremes for a long time before he leaped down. As the saying went, one's emotions were frail when one was close to one's home. Yun-yang's current mood was similar. Ever since he knew that his brothers might still be alive, the sorrow that had accumulated in his heart had lessened considerably. However, as long as he came here, he would always feel an inexplicable sense of worry. After all, it was only a possibility that they were still alive. How realistic was this possibility? What if he had guessed wrongly? Various thoughts arose one after another, his heart in turmoil. It was difficult for him to feel at ease for a moment. However, no matter how troubled he was, he still had to face reality. In the residence of 9 Supremes. In front of his third brother Supreme Wood's room. Yun-yang stood for a while, and as he cultivated the first stage of sacred wood charm, he placed his hand on the door. A moment later, the door quietly opened. Just like the previous doors, a fresh and clean aura immediately greeted him. Yun-yang was slightly taken aback. Lifting his head to look, he saw that the room was filled with lush potted plants. There were 4 shelves in each of the 4 directions, and on each shelf were 3 potted plants. The plants were green and rich, and all of them were exuding a strong aura of life. It made one feel relaxed and happy, and it was fascinating to look at. It should be noted that no one had entered the room for almost 3 years. Naturally, no one had taken care of them, watered them, or cultivated them. However, the 12 potted plants that Yun-yang could see were brimming with vitality, showing no signs of decay at all. It was incredible. In spite of this, Yun-yang ignored it after a quick glance and shifted his gaze to the table. Other than the potted plants, there was only a table and a chair in the room. On top of the table was a letter. It was Supreme Wood's will. Yun-yang could still vividly recall his third brother Supreme Wood's warm gaze, as if he would never lose his temper. He would always do things slowly, unhurriedly, but methodically, with a sense of tension and relaxation. His personality was, in fact, the more prominent one among the brothers. They had been together for so many years, but Yun-yang had never seen his third brother lose his temper. He had always taken good care of each of his brothers. Each time Yun-yang was by his third brother's side, even if he did not speak or make a sound, he would feel a sense of warmth as if he was bathed in the spring breeze. Chapter 735. There was no doubt that this was Supreme Wood's will. However, Yun-yang had only read the beginning of Supreme Wood's will and he could already feel that its content was different from the others. "Ninth brother, you're here. If I'm not wrong, then when you see this letter it should be 3 years after our accident. I also know that the person who comes will definitely be you. Isn't it strange?" Yun-yang perked up when he read the letter. His hands that had always been steady began to tremble. 3 years after our incident? What did this mean? Could it be that Supreme Wood's third brother had already known that there would be an accident and had even predicted the time? "I wanted to write a will like them, but I think that you must be on the verge of breaking down from the torment that you've endured all the way until now. I'm the only one who might know some inside information. I can't bear to let you suffer alone, so I'm leaving you a little bit of information here. When you read this letter, you should be enlightened. I'll take it that you'll understand half of it. Don't ask me why it's half because I actually don't know the other half. Thank you all night. When Yun Yang read up to this point, his heart that had been hanging in the air could finally be at ease. He almost cried tears of joy and sang a song. For a moment, he felt a lump in his throat. The boiling emotions that had been stored in his heart could not be contained. Yun Yang really wanted to sing, to dance, to scream, to yell, to jump, to vent the excitement in his heart. His brothers were not dead after all. Lied to me? What does it matter if they lied to me? Torture? What does it matter if I'm tortured? None of this matters. It didn't matter what he did. As long as they could live, as long as they were still alive. That was the best thing that could happen. The so-called joy in this world was nothing more than this. Yun Yang clutched the letter to his chest and breathed deeply, exhaling slowly. His face was beaming with joy and delight. It was only after a while that he managed to suppress his excitement and continued reading. The formation of the 9 Supremes is the will of the Creator, it's a predestined number. Only the candidates for the 9 Supremes are chosen by someone else. There are coincidences, necessity, and also cue cutters. I'm a cue cutter. Yun Yang frowned as he read the words, incomprehensible thoughts swirling in his heart. The word cue jumper was easy to understand, but the first line, the formation of the 9 Supremes, was the will of the Creator. Since it was the work of the Creator, whether it was intentional or not, it should be an unshakable destiny. Then how could there be the so-called cutting the cue? Who could cut the cue? Actually, I don't really remember much, only some fragments. It's probably because my physique is special and different from others. I knew that after this incident I would have to go back to where I came from. But I don't know where I came from and I don't know what's going on with the others. What's the situation? Yun Yang bit his lips tightly, the doubts in his heart growing. The memory fragments buried deep in my heart tell me that my surname is Tan. This surname is strange and rare, isn't it? I think it's strange too, but what stranger is my name? It's actually called Tanny. It said that when my father gave me my name, a group of brothers gathered together to come up with the idea of calling me Tanny. It meant that anyone who had something they were hesitating about could come and talk to me. Don't ask me why I suddenly brought up this topic because this is the clearest memory fragment buried deep in my heart. Other than that, I don't even know who my father is. Looking at the ellipsis in the letter, Yun Yang almost laughed out loud. He could totally imagine his third brother's speechless resentment towards his own name. Tanny. This name, it was truly a strange one. Come and talk to me if there's anything you're hesitating about. What a great idea. The person who came up with the idea was talented, but the person who decided on the name was even more talented. I'm cultivating a wood-based cultivation method, a completely supportive one. This suits my personality very well. I've always liked to help others. When I was choosing back then, I naturally chose the wood-based cultivation method, but this seems to be different from my father's original intention. I remember being beaten up many times, but eldest uncle was very appreciative of it. He protected me every time. Alright, the recollection of my memory fragments ends here. There doesn't seem to be anything more. These few years are the happiest days of my life, having so many brothers working hard together. It's a pity that it's all so short. Now that I have to leave, I'm filled with reluctance. Right, I always feel a sense of familiarity when I meet OL 5th and OL 8th, but I've never seen their shadow in my memory. This situation is very strange. However, this should be a good thing. I think OL 5th and OL 8th might be cue cutters as well. OL 9th, if something happens to all of us one day, OL 5th and OL 8th should be the 3 people you don't have to worry about the least. Reading up to this point, Yun Yang's heart clenched once more. What did he mean by only OL 3rd, OL 5th and OL 8th? What about the others? Could the others still be in danger? Thinking of this, Yun Yang quickly recalled the past. 5th and 8th sisters-in-law Yun Zuyu and Yu Rulan's inexplicable disappearance and third brother's unique letter proved that they had not met with death, but it also proved something else. For example, 7th brother, old Dugu's only son, he would definitely not be a cue cutter. Eldest brother and 4th sister, they too. I can't be sure about the whereabouts of the other brothers, but eldest brother is definitely not. The eldest brother in my memory isn't this current eldest brother. The 9 Supremes are unique existences that don't exist in heaven and earth. Therefore, out of the so-called 9 Supremes, only one will be left in the end. This is also fate. Supreme Wood's message was messy, as if he was trying hard to recall, trying to give Yun Yang more hints, but he could not recall anything no matter how hard he tried. Therefore, life and death is inevitable. Don't be blindly optimistic about the separation of life and death. Reading this, Yun Yang suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. It was unavoidable, unavoidable. Did this mean that someone among the brothers would definitely die? However, everyone's fate has always been inextricably linked to yours. Supreme Wood's message continued, one day in the future, if you can reach the level of dominating the universe, you can use your divine power to reverse time and revive the dead. Anything is possible for those who have reached that level. There's nothing that can't be done if you put your heart into it. Let's cut to the chase. My cultivation method, the so-called sacred wood charm, can't even be considered a trivial art. I don't mind giving it up and cultivate the art of vitality that I've always been cultivating. Remember to cultivate well. OL Second's golden charm is below. You can use it to open OL Second's room. Speaking of which, OL Second is also a ruthless character that I haven't seen through. The main reason is that I don't think the golden charm is of much use either. This can be considered as a reason. Alright, let's cut to the chase. We brothers will definitely meet one day. When that time comes, let's not stop until we're drunk. Supreme Wood's message came to an end. Yin Yang was dumbstruck. Chapter 736. There were too many things revealed in this, and there were too many things that could not be understood. The wills left behind by the other brothers were all genuine wills. Third brother Supreme Wood's will, on the other hand, was more like an instruction manual. It meant that he had an extraordinary background, it meant that the 9 Supremes were extraordinary, it meant that a few of his brothers were extraordinary. However, there were even more unexplainable things. The Creator's arrangement. Someone intervened in the selection of the 9 Supremes. Cue cutting. So many people with extraordinary backgrounds intervened in the 9 Supremes' descent. What kind of people were they? The final conclusion was that 3rd brother, 5th brother, and 8th brother must be fine. The eldest in his memory was not Supreme Earth, it was someone else. There must be a separation of life and death among the rest of the brothers. There was nothing more about their identities. His memory was blurry, he could not recall it. The residence of 9 Supreme's sacred wood charm, which was originally a wood-based arcane art, was but a useless skill that he did not hesitate to discard. My cultivation method, the art of vitality, is the real deal. Father. Eldest uncle. Oh, the 2nd brother mentioned at the end of the text seemed to have a different background. Yun Yang did not know what it meant and why it was specifically mentioned. It was intriguing. There was also the far-reaching ambition. Fate was related to you. When you became the ruler of the universe, you could cross the boundaries of time and space and resurrect anyone you wanted. These were the gist of what Supreme Wood had left behind in his book. In spite of this, these things were too abstruse, unimaginable, and beyond his knowledge. It made Yun Yang's usually clear mind feel like it was a ball of paste, or rather, a pot of boiled porridge. Everything in Supreme Wood's letter was like a fog in the clouds. All the words, really all the words, were only half written. Not a single sentence was completed. After sorting through Supreme Wood's words, the most direct impression Yun Yang had was that his 3rd brother's father was a weirdo. A weirdo who could stand shoulder to shoulder with a certain violent female father. He had actually named his own son as Why didn't you play a little? As for the rest, it was a complete mess and was unclear. His previously relaxed and even joyful mood was once again raised, suspended, and hung high up in the air. He had thought that his brothers had not perished and had been rescued, but it seemed that the chances were not optimistic. Right now, the only ones who could confirm that they were fine were Old 3rd, Old 5th, and Old 8th. At most, there would be the addition of 2nd brother, who might have some other background. As for the rest, it was all up to the heavens. Even so, I'm relieved of 2 things. Yun Yang chuckled bitterly. At the very least, it looks like 5th sister-in-law Yun Zuyu and 8th sister-in-law Yu Rulan have been taken away by 5th and 8th brother. They're really fine now. This also explains why Sister Yu gave me so many treasures, and why Sister Lan's letter was so strange. For a moment, Yun Yang could not tell if he was sad or happy. He only felt that his heart was a mess, so complicated that he was at a loss, unable to think. Yun Yang stayed in the small room for a long time before he finally whispered, "3rd brother, thank you." These words came from the bottom of his heart. Although he had gained a lot from this trip and was pleasantly surprised, he was also disappointed. If it were not for Supreme Wood's half-baked explanation, Yun Yang might not know how long it would take for him to figure it out on his own, based on the content that he had just read. This was not related to his intelligence, but the reasons were too unconventional. Each incident was as inconceivable as the mysterious red glow on Jilingxi's body, beyond his knowledge. He sighed softly and picked up Supreme Wood's letter rather reluctantly. Fiddling with it, he flipped the letter around and glanced at it. His eyes widened at once. On the back of the letter there was a paragraph of words. "I, your 3rd brother, love exotic flowers and plants the most in my life. These 12 pots of plants in the room are all good stuff that I've scoured through half of the profound sky continent to collect. They are all rare exotic plants, and at the same time, they are also treasures that are hard to come by. Consider them as a little gift from your third brother to you. So don't let me eat these 12 bonsai plants directly. If I do, it would be a reckless waste of resources. Use my art of vitality and sacred wood spell to infuse it into the plants. Within 10 days, each of the 12 plants can bear 3 fruits. Take note that each plant can only bear 3 fruits at most. If it bears more, it must be plucked at once. If there are more than 3, the medicinal effect will be weakened and it won't be good. Gather one of each of the 12 types of fruits and consume them together. It can increase the user's mystical energy by 120 years. Cough, ninth brother, you must take good care of these 12 bonsai for me. These are the 12 constellation fruit bonsai that I've collected for a long time. Yunyang did not know whether to laugh or cry at the other part of Supreme Wood's third brother's letter. Why had he not realized that his third brother was so adorable in the past? It looked like he really liked these 12 bonsai very much. Between the lines, there was a hint that he was afraid that Yunyang would take them for himself. It was conceivable that Supreme Wood had not planned to keep these 12 bonsai, but thinking that he might not be able to bring them away or for some other reason, he had left them behind. Despite knowing that he wanted to keep them, he had still instructed them earnestly, afraid that Yunyang would mistreat his precious baby. How adorable was this? You only want the plants themselves anyway. Too easy. I only want the fruits, I only want the fruits. Yunyang communicated with Emmy immediately. Emmy, do you see these 12 bonsai? Emmy, whose eyes were already filled with green light, could not help but feel itchy. Aya, is this a super good item? A dream item? Yunyang was stunned. The benefits of the plants mentioned in Supreme Wood's letter were that all 12 types of fruits had to be gathered to increase 120 years of mystical energy. Such an increase was, of course, a rare treasure to ordinary people, but to Yunyang, it was merely the icing on the cake. After all, Yunyang still had a boundless foundation hidden within him. It was hardly of much help, not to mention that there were so many varieties. Cultivating them was time-consuming and laborious, so the benefits would be limited in a short period of time. Aya. Aya. Emmy's soft voice was unusually excited, expressing its high opinion of the 12 pots of plants. It liked them very much and even seemed to be drooling. Chapter 738. With Yunyang's current mystical chi cultivation base, he had only spent half a day to complete the first stage of Supreme Earth's Earth Charm, despite the fact that he was cultivating multiple aspects at the same time, which was far more advanced than cultivating a single divine art. This was the benefit of having a strong foundation of mystical chi. If it had been someone else, it would have taken at least 30 to 50 years to cultivate the ground soil charm to such an extent, just like what Yunyang had done. What was even stranger was that Yunyang's cultivation of the earth charm felt like it was a matter of course. He did not feel like he needed to comprehend anything at all. He only needed to circulate his cultivation method once and he seemed to have entered the threshold. This was Yunyang's first time. The moment Yunyang's palm touched the door of Supreme Earth's room, a strange feeling rose within him. The feeling was indescribable. It was as if he had come to the end of a certain path today at this very moment. It was unknown whether it was the earth charm's cultivation method or Yunyang's will, but a door slowly opened amidst a thick yellow glow. It was Supreme Earth's final door. Yunyang looked over and saw that Supreme Earth's room was obviously much bigger than the other Supreme's rooms. Right in the middle hung a large piece of writing with Supreme Earth's own name inscribed on it. For the country and the people, never cherish this body. Yunyang stared at the words and could not help but be lost in thought. For the country and the people, never cherish this body. Indeed, Supreme Earth's entire life was a perfect representation of these words. Perhaps he was the reflection of these words. For the country and the people, he had truly given up on everything. It was not just the throne of emperor that was within his reach. There was also the joy of having a beautiful wife and a filial son. From the moment he was about to ascend to the throne, he no longer had a noble birth, he no longer saw his young beloved son. He had built the 9 Supremes team quietly, turning from a high place that everyone looked up to a dark corner that no one knew about. For so many years, he had fought in countless battlefields and risked his life many times. It was more than 1,000 setbacks, more than a narrow escape from death. He had made great contributions, unparalleled achievements, but no one knew about them. Not a single trace of the invincible aura that was praised by all had fallen upon him. For the sake of the country and the people, there was no need to cherish this life. In the end he realized the last 4 words. How could he cherish this body? He had lost his life on Tianshan Cliff. Even his name had never been carved on the tombstone. There was only his title, Supreme Earth. Supreme Earth. As one of the 9 Supremes, he was a hero in the hearts of Yutong's people, a noble presence. However, this hero, this greatness, had borne too much of Supreme Earth's sacrifice. Perhaps Supreme Earth could stay in the hearts of Yutong's people forever, but it was only Supreme Earth and not Yutong's eldest prince, Yu Qingtian. As the most eye-catching decoration in the room, Yunyang saw the words the moment he entered. A strange feeling welled up in his heart, as if Supreme Earth was standing there quietly looking at him. It was also as if the crown prince of Yutong, who was clad in a bright yellow robe that could not hide his valiant and awe-inspiring aura, had ascended to the throne, overlooking the world and overlooking the mountains and rivers. Big brother? Yunyang called out softly, his emotions abnormally agitated. On the table, the 4 treasures of the study were placed neatly. The ink had long dried and the tip of the brush had dried as well. It was like the tip of a javelin, faintly exuding a sense of sharpness. On the table there was not only a will like the others. Instead there were a few letters. A few letters that were neatly stacked into a stack. Yunyang approached slowly and stretched his hand out, picking up the stack of letters in his hand. Everything he saw. The top letter read, "To the brother who enters the room." The second letter read, "This son bids farewell to father." The third letter read, "This son bids farewell to mother." The fourth letter read, "To my beloved wife." The last letter read, "Brother, give this letter to Bao-er when Bao-er is 12 years old." When he read the fourth letter, Yunyang's heart skipped a beat. Supreme Earth was obviously holding on to a sliver of hope that even if he were to die, his wife, Supreme Water, would still have a chance to survive. It was a pity that Supreme Water was destined to never see this letter. This was because she had already accompanied her beloved husband into another world. Unlike the others, Yunyang could more or less confirm that his third brother, Supreme Wood, fifth brother, Supreme Flame, and eighth brother, Supreme Wind, had escaped death at Tianshan Cliff due to their unique background. There was also his second brother, Supreme Gold, who might still have a chance to escape. However, the remaining 4 Supreme Earth, Supreme Water, Supreme Blood, and Supreme Thunder had most likely perished. From Supreme Wood's letter, it was known that the arrival of the 9 Supremes was a great opportunity in this world. It was a specific number that could hardly be changed by man. Even if it could be changed, it would require an almighty figure that far surpassed this world to be able to alter it, like Supreme Wood's father, an almighty figure with unfathomable abilities. However, Supreme Earth and the rest were obviously not on this list. First, it was his 7th brother, Supreme Blood. His father, Old Dugu, did not have such an ability. Otherwise, he would not have perished in Ouyang Xiaoxia's hands. Then, it was his 6th brother, Supreme Thunder, who was from the Bound of Universe. Although Lei Dongtian, who was also from the Bound of Universe, possessed extraordinary abilities, Yunyang judged that the Bound of Universe probably did not have such an almighty figure after evaluating the abilities of both worlds. Even if there was, it would be difficult for them to be related to his 6th brother and be willing to make such a great effort. After all, his 6th brother had left the Bound of Universe because of his family, which was how the 9 Supremes had gathered. Then it was his eldest brother, Supreme Earth, and his 4th sister, Supreme Water. Both of them were confirmed to have no backing, so there was no hope of them escaping. Cutting the queue meant that there would only be a queue when there was already a queue. It was not changing all of them. Looking at the letter that was destined to not be received, Yunyang felt like he was choking. With a cough, he slowly sat up straight and tore open the first letter. He carefully unfolded it and took a closer look, only to see that there were lines of regular script on it. It was dignified and righteous, just like Supreme Earth's way of doing things. As the saying went, seeing the words was like seeing the person. It was not just a saying. Chapter 739. Yunyang read on. I've often wondered which brother would open this door and see this letter if I'm no longer here one day. Selfishly, I don't want it to be Supreme Water. If it's really you, please read this letter together with the one I've pointed out to you. I'm very sorry, I've promised to accompany you for the rest of your life. I can't do it anymore. If it's any other brother other than Supreme Water, who would it be? Well, second is determined, strong and sharp. If you read this letter, I hope that you won't be impulsive to avenge your brothers. Assist Yutong with all your might in the future. Do what we're doing well and live on our behalf. You're impulsive. If you're bent on revenge, you'll be easily found out by someone with ulterior motives. That would be terrible. Let me say this solemnly. If OL second reads this letter and you still see me as your big brother, don't seek revenge. Otherwise, I won't rest in peace and I'll never forgive you. OL third is gentle and far-sighted. He rarely acts rashly. I believe you'll plan slowly and won't let the dead down. As for Supreme Water, when you read this letter, think more about our children and less about me. You've done too much for me. If you still have the strength to spare, do something for Yutong that's within your capabilities. Remember, your responsibility in the future is to watch our children grow up healthily, not to seek revenge. This is my last request in this lifetime. Sai, you've never rejected anything from me. There's no exception this time either. I'm counting on you. He had exhorted Supreme Water once, yet here he was repeating it in the same sequence. Yunyang sighed, but his heart was filled with gratitude. His eldest brother's temper. No wonder His Majesty the Emperor was so assured in letting him build the 9 Supremes. If OL Fifth sees this, don't seek revenge. You're like a raging fire, too straightforward. You're no better than OL second brother, OL sixth. If you're the one who reads this letter in the end, I hope that you can choose to bear with it and abandon your identity as one of the 9 Supremes to take on another identity to carry out the follow-up. 7th brother, if it's God's will for you to see this letter, then it's really God's will. I only hope that you can restrain your murderous nature a little more. Discuss everything with Father. Although you know how to control yourself better than 2nd brother and 5th brother, once you're impulsive, your murderous nature is the heaviest among all the brothers. Delay urgent matters, especially when we're at a disadvantage. OL 8th brother, Supreme Wind, if you read this letter. I didn't warn you too much at first, believing that the revenge of our brother's death could be expected, given your cautious nature. However, you're too carefree and don't worry about anything. When I gave up the Crown Prince's position back then, no matter how resolute and passionate I was, I couldn't help but feel sad and lonely. After all, I'd lost the most important goal of the first half of my life and I could never get it back in this lifetime. However, the experiences that followed made me understand that nothing is more important than being truly happy. Being an emperor is to look down on the world and balance the universe, but there aren't many times when one can be happy. However, to be one of the 9 Supremes, even if it's a mountain of daggers or a sea of fire, even if it's a battlefield, every day is joyful. I'm very glad that I've made this decision. Your 4th sister, Supreme Water, is my wife. As someone who no longer has the identity of an empire's eldest son, I only have one promise to your sister-in-law, to accompany her for life. It's a pity that when you read this letter, I haven't even done this. Yutong, I'll leave it to you. The royal family, I'll leave it to you. If there are any brothers who came with you, you'll take care of them as well. My brother's funeral and families, I'll leave them all to you as well. Gratitude and grudges, I'll leave them to you as well. I'll leave them to you as well. Brother, don't think that I'm long-winded or cliché, but I still have to say that I'm very lucky to have a group of brothers like you. If there's a day when the world is at peace and Yutong is at peace, how wonderful it would be for the 9 of us to bring our families to roam the world. It's a pity that we can't do it anymore. Take care of yourself, 9th brother. If you find yourself in danger, you can give up everything else. Your survival is the first priority. What your brothers don't want the most is for something to happen to you. Take care. Brother Yu Qingtian's last words. His headache eased a little. It was just as the doctor had said, this illness came and went quickly. Chapter 740. Yu Qingtian. Yunyang looked at the 3 words and felt a wave of sorrow wash over him. Eldest brother's name. Supreme Earth's name. Ever since he knew that the eldest prince was Supreme Earth, he had come to know the name Yu Qingtian. However, seeing Supreme Earth call himself Yu Qingtian, he still felt an endless sense of sorrow. The shock that the eldest Supreme Earth's letter had caused to Yunyang was unprecedented. Before this, he had always thought that his escape was a last-minute decision made by his brothers. However, he had never imagined that the reason why he was able to escape with his life was not by chance, nor was it a coincidence. Instead, it was because of the escape route that his brothers had long since arranged. This meant that no matter when they encountered danger, no matter what sudden situation they faced, no matter how disadvantageous the situation was, if someone had to survive in the end, that person would definitely be him. It would not be any one of the other 8. They had long placed their only hope of survival on him. Making a decision on the spot and making a decision that had been planned for a long time were 2 completely different feelings. Yunyang covered his face with both hands, trembling all over. Tears flowed freely through the gaps between his fingers like a fountain. Who said that a man does not shed tears easily? It was only because he had yet to be heartbroken. The 9 Supremes had been carrying out dangerous missions all year round, facing death almost all the time, walking on the edge of life and death. Even if they were imbued with unparalleled powers, how could there be no accidents? At the end of the day, the 9 Supremes were still made of flesh and blood. When they encountered danger, they would be injured and die. However, his brothers had actually made such a decision long ago. When faced with the most extreme and irreversible crisis of death, they had given up on saving themselves and tried their best to protect their youngest brother. How could such an emotion be described with words? Why are you all doing this to me? What? Yun-yang cried out in pain. Do all of you know what it means to me to die with a smile and go to hell with a smile? In front of him, there seemed to be 8 masked men standing quietly looking at him. Each of their gazes was filled with affection and gentle smiles. It was like a group of big brothers looking at their little brother whom they had protected with everything they had. Yun-yang sat on the chair that originally belonged to Supreme Earth, staring blankly at the pile of letters before him. His gaze was already blank as if he could not see them. After a long time, he slumped on the seat like a pile of mud, weak as if his bones had been sucked out of him. My weakness only belongs to this moment. It will never be seen by anyone else. If my brother's souls are not far away, do it now if you want to laugh. There won't be another chance. Yun-yang smiled, his eyes brimming with tears. After I go out this time, I'll go straight to the Four Seasons Tower's lair and continue my long journey of martial arts. When I can reach that legendary realm one day, he gritted his teeth and said with a smile, I will find you one by one and settle this debt with you one by one. I don't care if you believe me or not, I believe in it. I have full confidence in myself. I will keep my promise. I won't be able to beat you all by then anyway. I will. Unknowingly, 8 pairs of eyes stared at him, still full of smiles, unperturbed. All right, I'm going to cultivate. Cultivating is the right thing to do now. Yun-yang murmured, don't look at me all of you. I'm very, very uneasy now. Go, wait for me to find all of you. I must find all of you. Yun-yang shut his eyes tightly. What Yun-yang held in his hands was Supreme Earth's Earth Charm, Supreme Gold's Art of Piercing Gold, Supreme Wood's Sacred Wood Charm, and Supreme Water's Cultivation Method. All 9 cultivation methods of the 9 Supremes were finally gathered in the hands of one person for the first time. At this moment, the cultivation incantations and methods of all 9 cultivation methods were circulating in Yun-yang's mind. As of today, Yun-yang's cloud cultivation method had already been cultivated to the 6th stage. His wind and fire cultivation methods were already at the 6th stage. Thunder cultivation method was at the 5th stage, blood cultivation method was at the 4th stage, and water cultivation method was at the 5th stage. The 3 elemental cultivation methods of metal, wood, and earth were only at the 1st stage. After all, they were newly learned and their achievements were limited. Although his 3rd brother Supreme Wood had suggested him to give up cultivating the sacred wood charm of the 9 Supremes would attribute cultivation method and switch to the more mystical art of life, Yun-yang still chose to cultivate the sacred wood charm after some consideration. After all, no matter how mystical the art of life was, it was not a cultivation method of the 9 Supremes' powers. What he needed most now was to combine the 9 Supremes into one. Now that he had all 9 cultivation methods, it meant that he could cultivate all 9 of them. However, Yun-yang did not dare to be too optimistic. After all, he had the experience of trying to cultivate wind, cloud, water, fire, thunder, and blood cultivation methods at the same time. Although his cloud form was formless, when he cultivated the mystique wind conjuration with the cloud form, there was a surge of wind and clouds, making it twice the result with half the effort. However, when he cultivated the 3rd cultivation method at the same time, not only was the effect not good, the effect was greatly reduced. After several attempts, Yun-yang realized that although there was a certain level of improvement when he cultivated 3 or more cultivation methods, they would hinder each other due to the mutual restraints such as fire and water, blood staining the clouds, and wind and thunder being difficult to merge. It was not as fast as cultivating one. Because of this, the progress of the 6 cultivation methods was uneven. Although he had obtained all the cultivation methods of the 9 Supremes, Yun-yang still dared not cultivate all 9 of them at the same time. He tried it out with the sacred wood charm, which was the most amiable form. Just as he raised his chi and circulated it slightly, he was shocked to realize that the 9 mystical powers in his meridians were circulating at an unusually high speed. Whether it was the cloud form that had reached an extremely high level of cultivation base or the earth charm that he had just learned, the 9 cultivation methods were circulating at lightning speed. The cultivation methods of any cultivator, be it the 8 extraordinary meridians, the 12 standard meridians, or even the 3 meridians and 7 chakras. There were many different types of cultivation methods, each with their own unique principles. When a person cultivated 2 or more cultivation methods, there was a high chance that the 2 cultivation routes would overlap or even clash. Therefore, unless it was a very special cultivation method, it was difficult to cultivate 2 or more cultivation methods at the same time and still be able to advance smoothly. This was the reason why Yun Yang's progress when he cultivated multiple cultivation methods at the same time was extremely slow, a far cry from cultivating them separately. As for Yun Yang mastering 9 cultivation methods at the same time, it meant that he had to circulate 9 cultivation routes. Logically speaking, it was impossible to cultivate them at the same time. If he were to force himself to do so, not only would he only achieve half the result with twice the effort, it would be futile and he might even suffer a backlash that would severely injure him. However, when the 9 forces that were not intentionally guided gathered together, they were like 9 brothers of the same origin. As long as one of them moved, the others would move and dance with it. Chapter 741. The 9 types of powers surged in at the same time, yet there was no conflict between them at all. There was not even the slightest feeling of discomfort. The powers of the 9 phases merged and then separated again. It was still orderly and orderly. In the blink of an eye, the Earth Charm, Sacred Wood Charm, Invincible Metal Charm, and the other 7 cultivation methods that were lagging behind advanced with great strides like a hot knife through butter, leveling up by a level in an instant. Yun Yang's jaw almost dropped from shock at the change. What kind of advancement speed was this? It was too freakish. It was a pity that Yun Yang's surprise was destined to have a beginning but not an end. He would probably have to sit back and relax from the shock because Yun Yang then realized that the previous round of cultivation base advancement was not the end but the beginning. His cultivation progress could no longer be stopped once it started. As his cultivation method advanced rapidly, the endless spiritual qi from the outside world surged into his body like rivers flowing into the ocean. It was impossible to refuse and it was even more impossible to stop. The 9 forces twisted into a rope, wrapping around Yun Yang and propelling him forward with unstoppable momentum. Yun Yang, who was in a delicate situation, could clearly feel that the barriers in his body that hindered his cultivation breakthrough were being unlocked one by one. The force of qi was unstoppable, but he had no control over his own body. He was extremely passive, like a third party outside of himself. He could only watch from the sidelines, unable to do anything more. Within his body, muffled sounds constantly rang out. That was the sound of hidden acupoints being opened one after another. The idea that there might be many hidden chakras in his body in the past had become a reality. They were being awakened one after another, becoming a channel for the advancement of his cultivation base. With each awakened chakra, there was a gush of spiritual qi that seemed to have found a new channel, surging into his body like mercury spilling onto the ground, pervasive. Yin Yang felt like he was in a fog. He was genuinely shocked and incredulous by everything that he was experiencing. Ever since the beginning of time in the Tianshan continent, or in other places like the Bound of Universe, or even in other realms, all profound qi cultivators had been cultivating their acupoints. Acupoints were naturally formed and could not be increased or decreased. This was a universally acknowledged truth. Although it was said that there were some people with great luck who, under certain opportunities, could open 1 or 2 more acupoints on top of the original acupoints. However, this was a special case and not a fixed view. The fixed view of the world was that there were only 9 acupoints in the human body. This precedent had long been broken by Yun Yang. Not only had he awakened all 9 chakras, he had even awakened a few more chakras on top of that. His foundation was far beyond what the world knew. The situation now, however, was that the countless chakras in Yun Yang's body were being forcefully opened by the combined power of the 9 incarnations' powers like a hot knife through butter. Yun Yang did not understand or even know what was happening. He could only grit his teeth and persevere. My brothers will never harm me. This should be the inevitable process of the 9 Supremes merging into one. The divine powers of the 9 Supremes merged into one and forcefully entered his meridians, causing an extraordinary amount of pain. The agony of his body, his mind, and his deific consciousness were all intertwined. Every nerve fiber in his body was spasming in agony. From the nerves that were pulled by each strand of hair to the muscles that were pulled by his toenails, they were all cramping. They were all convulsing. In comparison, the pain of the physical body was simply insignificant. What was death by 1,000 cuts compared to the pain he was experiencing now? Compared to the pain he was experiencing now, Yun Yang felt that it was not much different from a mosquito bite. In spite of this, Yun Yang puffed out a breath and sat there, persevering. He firmly believed that the smooth path was in front of him. As long as he could make it, he would be fine. His brothers would never harm him. As Yun Yang persevered, the condition of his body changed again. Every 2 hours, his skin would rupture without warning. Countless thin lines of blood splattered out, turning the entire room crimson in a foggy haze. Later on, the process became even shorter. Correspondingly, the density of the spiritual energy in the room also increased, gradually forming liquid raindrops. In the end, it was like a torrential downpour of spiritual energy in this small room. It was like an endless spiritual chi storm washed over Yun Yang's body, replenishing his body's needs at the same time. Yun Yang's current state was like his entire being was disintegrating and reassembling again and again. The process was completely uncontrollable and unstoppable. Yun Yang could only persevere and wait. He could not stop what was happening at the moment, so he could only persevere instinctively and continue to persevere. He would pass out occasionally, but he would be woken up by the pain in the next moment. He would pass out again and wake up again. Eventually, even short periods of unconsciousness became unattainable. His senses and sense of pain seemed to be magnified 10 times, 100 times more. Every bit of pain was magnified to its limit. He could feel the pain that was countless times more agonizing than death by 1,000 cuts, but he could only endure it passively without the option of giving up. If there was one thing that Yun Yang could still feel comforted about, it would be the fact that he was improving. He was improving at an unbelievable speed, becoming unprecedentedly powerful, and his strength was still growing. Yun Yang was suddenly struck by a thought. Why did Jilingxi only need to sleep for her ascension to happen naturally and smoothly? Yet, when it came to him, the process was F*King excruciating. Even though he had ascended, the process was F*King painful. People often said that happiness and pain went hand in hand, the best of life. Yun Yang's current state, the joy of increasing his ability and the agony of dying in a split second, were both equally interesting. Life was so messed up. The undeniable pain of not moving made Yun Yang neglect the fact that a gigantic tornado had formed above the residence of 9 Supremes when the 9 cultivation methods gathered in his body at the same time. The moment he cultivated, the sky above the residence of 9 Supremes had suddenly turned into a gigantic tornado. Wind had always been formless, but it was something that truly existed. The gigantic tornado above the residence of 9 Supremes was like a giant, transparent funnel, spinning rapidly as it soared into the sky. Wherever it passed, the clouds in the sky moved with it, sucked in with a whoosh. At this moment, the tornado seemed to have a tangible form. Chapter 742. Endless spiritual chi crossed the endless space, pouring into the tornado from above the 9 heavens and from all directions. Like rivers flowing into the ocean, it surged into the residence of 9 Supremes endlessly. The already thick fog in the residence of 9 Supremes grew as thick as water, almost solidifying into a solid substance. However, that huge amount of spiritual chi was still gathering and flowing continuously. The center of the residence of 9 Supremes was where Supreme Earth's room was located. It was also where the boundless spiritual chi converged. The spiritual chi rain that was pouring in the room came from. Yun Yang was still sitting on the chair that belonged to Supreme Earth, his eyes shut tight as he focused on cultivating. As time went on, not only did the giant tornado in the sky not wither, it grew in size instead. The spiritual chi that flowed into the 9 Supremes increased as well. The spiritual chi that washed over Yun Yang like a storm gradually turned from liquid to a more solid state. Countless wisps of white spiritual chi circled Yun Yang's body like little jubilant snakes, spinning merrily around him. With each spin, some of the snakes disappeared, but more white spiritual chi snakes joined in to fill in the gaps as they continued to spin. It continued to replenish and disappear, and the cycle began again and again without end. The residence of 9 Supremes, which had been silent, was enveloped by the unprecedentedly dense fog, changing colors continuously. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and purple. All sorts of colors were present, constantly changing in a magnificent display. After some time, the entire Tiantang city was illuminated by the various colors of the residence of 9 Supremes, as if the city was plated with a layer of glamorous colors. It was as if some peerless treasure had suddenly appeared in the middle of a dark night, illuminating the universe and adding color to the world, filling it with an eerie, radiant atmosphere. However, it was daytime now. How could this be? No one in the vast capital city of Tiantang City could not see this sight. It was not only visible within thousands of miles of Tiantang City, but it was also slowly expanding. As a day passed, the area gradually covered the entire Yutong's territory. Even those who were tens of thousands of miles away from Tiantang City could clearly see the dazzling colors. Then the color of the sky began to slowly change again. From dusk, the color gradually darkened and turned blue. Finally, it turned into the purest purple. Under the heavens, there was nothing that wasn't like this. There were no more stars or moons that could enter one's eyes. Like a huge dark purple emerald, the night sky that should have been dark and gloomy was replaced by the night sky. Above this purple sky, in a place where no one could see, endless eastern purple chi came from the eastern horizon. It swarmed over, covering the sky and covering the earth as it rushed over. Countless people who witnessed this scene were astounded. They stared at the unprecedented phenomenon with their mouths agape and eyes wide open. In the residence of Yun, Jilingxi sprung up and stared in the direction of the residence of 9 Supremes, bewildered. Why is there such a commotion? Has something big happened? A silhouette flashed by his side, and Yun Xiaoyao's tall figure abruptly appeared in the air. His face was heavy with worry as he looked at the source of the light, his lips pressed tightly together. He closed his eyes and tried his best to conceal his concern and anxiety. But now he could no longer control his thoughts and emotions. The corners of his mouth twitched uncontrollably, and his head was drenched in sweat. Can you still hold on? He couldn't hold on. What had actually happened? Why did the residence of 9 Supremes, which had been quiet for a long time, suddenly cause such a huge commotion? Jilingxi asked curiously, Uncle Yun, is the commotion here related to Yun Yang? Yun Xiaoyao stood quietly in the air, his eyes glued to the colorful glow. He did not hear a single word that Jilingxi had said even though she was just inches away from him. It was as if he did not hear her at all. Jilingxi looked at Yun Xiaoyao in shock and suddenly bit her lip. I'll go take a look. By the time Yun Xiaoyao came back to his senses and opened his eyes, Jilingxi was already far away. He could not help hollering, Don't be rash. Don't go over. The holler was like a bolt from the blue reverberating 10 miles away. Although Jilingxi was fast, she was still caught by the roar. Initially, with Jilingxi's current cultivation base, Yun Xiaoyao's roar did not faze her, even though it was powerful and extraordinary. However, Yun Xiaoyao's other identity as Yun Yang's father was obviously more intimidating. She was so frightened that she could not help but stop and turn to look. Judging from the commotion over there, I'm afraid there's an unknown danger. Let's take a look first. Yun Xiaoyao's eyes were filled with anxiety and anguish, but he still stared at Jilingxi and said word by word, The residence of 9 Supremes does not allow anyone to go near it now. Anyone who goes near will be punished by heaven. His words were spoken with extreme gravity. Huh? Jilingxi exclaimed at once and asked anxiously, Then, is he all right? Yun Xiaoyao did not answer for a long time, only staring into the distance in a daze. After a long time he murmured, He'll be fine. He'll be fine. His voice was indescribably determined. We only need to wait patiently and observe the situation. He'll definitely come back safely. As long as he comes back, this world will be the moment of change. Yun Xiaoyao sucked in a deep breath. Beads of sweat trickled down his hands that were clasped behind his back where Jilingxi could not see. It was caused by excessive nervousness. Even his fists were clenched so tightly that they were sweating profusely. As the saying went, those who could heal would not heal themselves. Those who advised others to wait patiently and observe the situation might not necessarily be calm and patient. His Majesty was chatting with Qiu Jianhan and Fang Qingtian. Are you saying that Wu Ying is actually so capable? I've really underestimated him in the past. The Emperor asked. His talent is even greater than what we've told him. The only word that can describe him is that he's a master of the universe. Qiu Jianhan nodded heavily, praising Yun Che as much as he could. Just as Fang Qingtian was about to say something in response, he froze. What is this? All three of them turned to look in unison, only to see a myriad of colors appearing in midair, dazzling and resplendent. The source? His Majesty stood up abruptly and strode to the window. He could not help but exclaim, The residence of 9 Supremes? Has the residence of 9 Supremes caused a commotion? The two big shots turned silent at the same time. Where else could it be other than the residence of 9 Supremes in the entire Tiantang city that could cause such a commotion? How could this be? The residence of 9 Supremes has never caused such a commotion before. Is it a warning from heaven? His Majesty frowned and said, Or, is it Supreme Cloud? Qiu Jianhan and Fang Qingtian did not speak. They really did not know what had happened. Such an earth-shattering phenomenon. What is Supreme Cloud trying to do? Or are there other heretics plotting against us? His Majesty stood up abruptly. Come, let's go take a look. Chapter 743. Of course they had to go and take a look. In spite of this, the two elders were feeling anxious as well. At this delicate juncture, when the army has set off to conquer Zio and lay the foundations of our ambitions, the residence of 9 Supremes has suddenly undergone such a change. Is it a curse or a blessing, a golden opportunity or a crisis? What? His Majesty spoke as they walked out. His words sounded like he was talking to himself. The two elders knew that there was no need for them to answer. If such a commotion is caused by Supreme Cloud, if Supreme Cloud actually possesses such power, doesn't that mean that he has the power of an immortal in the truest sense? On the other hand, if such a commotion is caused by the heretics who don't care about the will of heaven, doesn't it mean that the residence of 9 Supremes is facing an unprecedented test? His Majesty murmured, regardless of which, it all points to the same thing. The so-called secular imperial power is something that Supreme Cloud or a true Almighty can destroy with a raise of his hand? This sentence was rather sensitive. Qiu Jinhan's expression was equally conflicted as he said slowly, the secular imperial power, the so-called power to rule the world, has never been in Supreme Cloud's eyes. Isn't this something we all know? This was the truth. The 9 Supremes had long been a living legend in the hearts of Yutong's subjects and people. Their prestige had long surpassed the imperial power. It was just that the Emperor of Yutong knew the true meaning of the 9 Supremes' establishment, so he did not mind it at all. This throne has never been in the 9 Supremes' eyes. His Majesty mused, a thought suddenly rising in his mind. Let us go there and take a look. His Majesty made up his mind and hastened his steps. Your Majesty, you've said it yourself. The commotion at the residence of 9 Supremes could be caused by the heretics. It's better to wait until the matter is settled before we go. It's all right. We'll only watch from afar this time, we won't really get close. Even if it's really the heretics who are causing trouble at the residence of 9 Supremes, I don't think they'll lay a hand on us. The Emperor's expression was rather complicated and melancholy as he said, My dear Minister Qiu, you may not know this, but right now, I have a vague feeling that perhaps after today, we will never see the residence of 9 Supremes again. Just as His Majesty stepped out of the hall, the entire sky suddenly turned purple. The entire sky was like a pure dark purple jade that was tens of millions of miles in size, inlaid in the sky. Endless sea. The surface of the sea, which had always been calm, suddenly became turbulent and golden light flickered. With a whoosh, the waves soared into the sky, reaching thousands of feet high. Golden light flashed in the sky and more than 10 figures appeared in the sky, standing on the waves. They stared at the deep purple color in the sky, and suddenly roared towards the sky. The seal is finally broken. The wheel of the era has begun once again. I'm waiting for my destiny. The winds and clouds of the world are finally moving. Go to the Shenhuang world. This time, I must seize this opportunity. More than a dozen figures waved their sleeves and soared into the sky, disappearing in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the 1,000-foot-tall wave crashed down, followed by a tsunami, in a hidden valley somewhere. Ling Xiaozue and Du Guchou, who had just gone through a great chase, as well as the severely injured Gu Chaoyang and Feng Xiang'e, stood up immediately as well, gazing at the sky for a long time. They were less than 3,000 miles away from Tiantang City. If the 4 of them had been in perfect condition and sprinted at full speed, they could have rushed back in 4 hours at most. However, they did not have the strength to do so now. The 4 of them looked at the sudden change of heaven and earth, astonishment written all over their faces. Ling Xiaozue was astonished, shocked, doubtful, and puzzled by the sudden change, so was Du Guchou. In spite of this, Feng Xiang'e's eyes were gleaming as a massive aura flashed across him. Gu Chaoyang, on the other hand, was the most shocked among the 4 of them. He stared at the sky, dumbstruck, before he began to tremble. Lowering his head, he stared at the purple jade flute in his hand in a daze. After a while, he cried out involuntarily, It's too late. Du Guchou turned around abruptly. Too late? What's too late? Gu Chaoyang stomped his feet and said, We can't make it back to Tiantang City in time. Oh God, what should we do? We've actually missed this great opportunity because of our stubbornness. His frustrated expression looked like he was about to tear his own head off. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. What's going on? How is this a great opportunity? Asked Ling Xiaozue. Gu Chaoyang suddenly grabbed Ling Xiaozue's hand, his expression extremely serious. Old Ling. You are the only one who can help us right now. You must help me. When he said you must help me, Gu Chaoyang's expression turned menacing. What's going on? How can I help you if you don't explain yourself? Asked Ling Xiaozui. Now that so many things had happened, Gu Chaoyang had successfully cleared his suspicion. Not only was Ling Xiaozui no longer suspicious of him, he was also almost defenseless. Currently they were truly sworn brothers of life and death. If he could help, of course he would not refuse. However, Gu Chaoyang had spoken so solemnly that even though Ling Xiaozui had decided to help, he still had to ask for clarification. Please. Gu Chaoyang's face was filled with determination. With a sudden flick of his wrist, he passed the purple jade flute in his hand over. The group had seen the purple jade flute in Gu Chaoyang's hand many times throughout this period of time they had spent together, so they did not feel much about it. However, when they looked at it again now, they were shocked to realize that the color of the purple jade flute was actually the same as the purple that had coalesced in the sky. There was no difference at all. Please, you must hurry to Tiantang City at the fastest speed and throw this purple jade flute into the residence of 9 Supremes. Please. Gu Chaoyang offered the purple jade flute with both hands and dropped to his knees with a thud. This incident concerns the welfare of this world. My personal fate is inconsequential, but I beg of you. You must go as fast as you can. Even if you have to risk your life, there mustn't be a moment of delay. You must make it. Ling Xiaozui was shocked by Gu Chaoyang's action. There's really no time to explain now. Gu Chaoyang was burning with anxiety. Please, you must believe me, or else, it's all over. The purple jade flute glowed and shimmered like it was responding to the purple hue in the sky. It looked like it could soar into the sky at any time. What is it? Ling Xiaozui frowned. Can't you let me know? Gu Chaoyang was so anxious that he did not know what to say. He stomped his feet and said, Stop nagging, go quickly. I beg you, go quickly. The 9 Supremes have returned. The 9 Supremes have returned. Chapter 744. Hearing the 4 words, Ling Xiaozui was stunned and so was Dugucho. The 9 Supremes return, the earth will split and the sky will be overturned. The martial world and the world will be reigned supreme. These 4 phrases were widespread, too many people had heard of them. While they were not universally known, they were well known. To experts like Ling Xiaozui, however, they did not think much of it. After all, they were already at the pinnacle of this world, boasting that they knew the cultivators of this world like the back of their hands. The 9 Supremes' supernatural powers were remarkable, but they were still within the limits of this world. It was too much to expect them to split the earth and turn the sky upside down. However, when these 4 phrases came from Heaven's Inquisition, Gu Chaoyang's mouth, it was different from the past. At least, it was different for Ling Xiaozui and Dugucho. There must be a deeper meaning behind it. Feng Xiang'e, who was standing aside, had a glint in his eyes as he said with a smile, The 9 Supremes return? He said curiously, The 9 Supremes return is the 9 Supremes matter after all. What does it have to do with your purple jade flute? Could it be that the great destiny you spoke of just now is all tied to this flute? As he spoke, he reached out to take it. Gu Chaoyang had intended to pass the purple jade flute to Ling Xiaozui and send it to the residence of 9 Supremes in Tiantang City as soon as possible. He did not hold it in his hand as usual, but propped it on his palm. He was kneeling on the ground, waiting for Ling Xiaozui's action. Ling Xiaozui, on the other hand, was deep in thought and had yet to snap out of it. Naturally, he could not take it in time. Feng Xiang'e's timely move seemed slow but was actually fast. It was so fast that before the 3 experts could think of stopping him, he had already grabbed one end of the purple jade flute. Gu Chaoyang was quick to react, grabbing the other end almost instinctively. He cried out anxiously, What are you doing? Take it back. Feng Xiang'e said with a smile, It's only a purple jade flute. Why are you so anxious? Could there really be some hidden secret? Let me take a look. His words were spoken with a smile, but his hands were firm as he exerted his strength. Gu Chaoyang could only feel an immense force that he could no longer hold on to the purple jade flute. His hand was empty as the flute was snatched away by Feng Xiang'e. Gu Chaoyang panicked, spitting a mouthful of blood as he hissed, Feng Xiang'e. He turned to look at Ling Xiaozui and roared anxiously, What are you waiting for? It's over. It's over. Ling Xiaozui turned his head abruptly. There was really no time to consider anything now. He stretched his arm out to Feng Xiang'e and said, Give it to me. His eyes were gleaming with a sharp glint. At a time like this, he instinctively chose to believe in Gu Chaoyang. Gu Chaoyang's actions earlier had already indicated that the matter was of great importance and could not be messed up. Even a moment of delay would be a sin. Moreover, Feng Xiang'e had been severely injured earlier. His current condition should be the weakest among the four of them. He should not have the ability he currently possessed. It was already very suspicious. Feng Xiang'e chuckled. "Brother Ling, why are you doing this? It's just a flute. Don't tell me that with our friendship, looking at it and fiddling with it for a while, what's there to fight over?" Clang. It was the sound of a long sword being unsheathed. Feng Xiang'e turned to look at the source of the sound and saw Dugucho holding a long sword in his hand. His gaze was chilling as well, already in a stance where he was one with his sword. His eyes were staring at Feng Xiang'e like two beams of sword light that could tear through the heavens as he said in a low voice, "Give it to me." Feng Xiang'e seemed to be enraged as he hollered, "What is this? What are you doing? The two of you are simply unreasonable. Are you really coveting this so-called great opportunity?" He held the purple jade flute in his hand, seeming to be infuriated. "We've gone through so many life and death situations together. Are you actually going to attack me just because of some ridiculous nonsense? What 9 Supremes unite? Watch me destroy this flute first to cut off your delusions. Otherwise, your cultivation journey will be ruined if your state of mind is flawed." He gripped one end of the purple jade flute and snapped it downwards resolutely with a huff. "How dare you?" Gu Chaoyang was furious. Ling Xiaozue unsheathed his sword and pointed it between Feng Xiang'e's brows as well, hollering, "Hand over the jade flute, it's not too late." The chilliness hit him in the face, causing the muscles on Feng Xiang'e's face to twitch. It chilled him like he was submerged in an icy spring. He lifted his head slowly, looking at Ling Xiaozue in disbelief before glancing at Dugucho. His rage intensified as he hollered, "You're willing to go against your conscience when you see an opportunity? Do you want to attack me? Come on. Both of you come at me together. Let's see if I'm afraid." Gu Chaoyang exclaimed, "Quick, it's too late." Feng Xiang'e channeled his mystical energy holding the purple jade flute as he said, "Come. Win me and you can have this purple jade flute." Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho frowned at the same time but did not make a move. If they were to really fight, what Gu Chaoyang had said would be too late, no matter what would happen next. Feng Xiang'e's current demeanor in particular, could very well destroy the purple jade flute the moment they clashed. He could even borrow the combined force of both of them to destroy the treasure. "Feng Xiang'e, who are you? Why do you have to pretend when things have come to this?" The sharpness in Ling Xiaozue's gaze grew sharper. A wave of sword energy slowly grew and converged on him, rising gradually. Feng Xiang'e chuckled and said, "Ling Xiaozue, you haven't drunk any wine. Why are you talking drunkenly? Don't you even recognize me? You want to fall out with me just because of some illusory opportunity?" Ling Xiaozue nodded slowly and said, "Hand over the purple jade flute before I count to 3. Otherwise, it will be the moment I shatter my own sword heart." He enunciated each word clearly, "I believe you know what that means." Feng Xiang'e's pupils shrunk as he said, "I know you know too. Why not try? Do you dare?" Ling Xiaozue nodded slowly. The sword energy surrounding him thickened and soared into the sky as he uttered slowly, "1." Feng Xiang'e chuckled. "Why would you do that? I believe you dare, too." Ling Xiaozue hollered. He didn't stop at all. It was obvious that he didn't hesitate at all. Feng Xiang'e rolled his eyes and said, "We're friends. There's no need for a life and death struggle. I'll give it to you." Suddenly a loud holler rang out, "Dugucho, what are you waiting for?" Before his words echoed in the air, he shot into the sky from where he stood like a cannonball. Mystical chi surged into the purple jade flute while Feng Xiang'e soared like a ray of light. Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho's swords struck at the same time. The sword light pointed straight at Feng Xiang'e who was in midair. The sword energy tore through the 9 heavens. With a loud cry, Feng Xiang'e swayed in midair and spun, turning upside down and feet up. He was shrouded in a boundless hurricane. The next moment, a deafening explosion resounded. Chapter 745. It was not Feng Xiang'e. This was an obvious fact now. Feng Xiang'e should have been severely injured. Even if he was healthy, he still would not have had the ability to withstand Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho's full-force attack. What more when they joined forces? Not only could this person before them, this fake Feng Xiang'e, go head-on against both of them, he had only been injured. Both of them still had to withstand the counterattack. It was not a pleasant experience. Based on this capability alone, he had to be at least a master of the same level as Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho. Otherwise it would have been impossible. Feng Xiang'e, who was in midair, was bleeding from his 7 orifices as he spat a mouthful of blood. He staggered but managed to regain his footing several hundred feet in the air. Coughing, he said with a chuckle, "This purple jade flute is not bad. It hasn't shattered even after being pushed to the limit. It's worthy of me. I'll accept it." Before his words echoed in the air, he had already set his stance. It was obvious that he was going to soar into the air and travel 1,000 miles away. Ling Xiaozui let out another deep roar like a dragon, a look of determination on his face. The other party could still move so freely after taking on both of their attacks. His capability was more than just powerful. Ling Xiaozui could vaguely guess this person's true identity. However, he did not expect that this person would choose to reveal himself now after disguising himself for so long. He did not even hesitate to abandon their original plan. The only reason was to stop the 9 Supremes from reuniting? Then the other party must be Mr. Nian. The Four Seasons Tower's true top person, the one and only Mr. Nian, the real Mr. Nian. Only he would view the reuniting of the 9 Supremes with such importance. The instantaneous realization left Ling Xiaozui with no other options left to him. Now that things had come to this, there was no other way to keep this terrifying enemy here other than self-destructing his sword core and perishing together. Sword energy whizzed, filling the air with desolation. Just as Ling Xiaozui was about to soar with his sword and unleash his maximum strength to fight for his life, he suddenly stopped what he was about to do. A shocking change had occurred before his eyes. In midair, Feng Xiang'e, who had fled hundreds of feet away with the purple jade flute, suddenly cried out. As he trembled, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The purple jade flute, which was supposed to be held tightly in his hand, fell out of his hand. Then Feng Xiang'e, who was in midair, cried out again. His body trembled even more violently. His black hair suddenly turned white, then snow white. In the blink of an eye, it had fallen off completely. However, that person was not in the mood to pay attention to his own condition. His entire mind was focused on what was in front of him, as if he had seen a ghost. In front of him was the purple jade flute. At this moment, it was suspended in mid-air, and its entire body was overflowing with an extremely noble purple color. It was like the emperor of the sky looking down on the world, elegant and calm, inviolable. With a slight tilt, the purple jade flute, which was still emitting a colorful purple aura, began to slowly descend. A voice seemed to come from beyond the 9 heavens. It was elegant, ethereal, and unfathomable, but it showed the calmness of looking down on the world. Blowing through the lake waters of the 9 heavens, only the purple jade flute in my hand. In the sky, Feng Xiang'e watched the falling purple jade flute indignantly. However, with a flash of sword light, Dugucho had already taken off with his sword, his target Feng Xiang'e. With a loud cry, Feng Xiang'e turned into a ray of light and soared into the sky, vanishing in a flash. This person obviously knew that he could not continue. Putting aside the fact that he had just endured Ling Xiaozui and Duguchao's combined attack and was severely injured, the damage caused by the purple jade flute's mutation had further reduced his combat strength. If he did not leave immediately, he would be in danger of being killed. Although the person was escaping at a high speed, Dugucho and Ling Xiaozui's eyes could still see that the imposter Feng Xiang'e had aged a few more years in an instant. Perhaps 100 years of his lifespan had been drained away, and his hair and beard had all fallen off. Age spots had appeared on his face as well, and his entire body was beginning to exude an aura of old age. His hands were like dried chicken claws. It was as if the change just now, a strange force had sucked away a large part of his vitality. Even if he had managed to escape, it was only a dying old man. Looking at his condition, he might not be able to live for more than 3 days. He was only left with the last struggle to prolong his life. "Don't chase after him," Gu Chaoyang cried out hysterically. "Go send the flute first, it's urgent." Ling Xiaozui sprung up without another word, grabbing the purple jade flute in his hand and saying in a low voice, "I'll go." Before his words echoed in the air, he turned into a ray of light and sped towards Tiantang City with a deafening clap of thunder. The purple in the sky grew thicker, not diminishing with the passage of time. Ling Xiaozui, who was sprinting at full speed, charged into the purple aura like a ray of light. It was as if he had become one with the purple aura, vanishing just like that. Obviously, Ling Xiaozui knew that the matter was urgent, so he was going all out. Seeing that Ling Xiaozui had finally left, Gu Chaoyang heaved a sigh of relief and plopped onto the ground. Sweat broke out all over him, drenching his clothes instantly. He murmured weakly, "I hope I can make it in time. I hope I can make it in time. I must make it in time." Dugu Cho sucked in a breath and pulled Gu Chaoyang up, saying, "Can you tell me what happened now?" Gu Chaoyang exhaled and said, "I'm sorry, I still can't say." Dugu Cho said, "Forget it then. Let's go quickly." Gu Chaoyang was inexplicably agitated due to the series of events just now. His legs were still shaking as he said, "Carry me. Let's hurry to Tiantang City as well. Perhaps we can catch up to the tail." Dugu Cho said, "All right. Let's go." Without further ado, he carried Gu Chaoyang on his back and sprinted towards Tiantang City. "Dugu, you have a bad temper but you're still a nice person." "Is that so? Thank you for the compliment." Silence ensued. After a long time, Gu Chaoyang said, "Dugu, for today's sake I'll give you a word of advice." Dugu Cho said faintly, "This is what I should do. You don't owe me anything." Gu Chaoyang smiled and said, "Dugu, I've observed your destiny. You have a calamity of certain death before you that you have to face. As long as you can get through it, there will be no more obstacles in your path to immortality." Dugu Cho dared not neglect Gu Chaoyang's dictum. He said, A calamity of certain death? May I ask how it can be resolved? Since it's a calamity of certain death, I'm afraid it can't be easily resolved." "That's not necessarily the case. As long as you find the right person, death can be spared. However, there's only one person in this world who can resolve this calamity of certain death for you." Gu Chaoyang said in a low voice, "As long as you follow this person, not only will you be spared from the calamity, perhaps the hope of you and your wife reuniting will also rest on this person." Crick. Dugu Chao's body that was charging forward like an arrow came to an abrupt halt. The soles of his shoes drew two deep grooves on the ground as he said, "Oblivious, what did you say?" Chapter 746. Dugu Chao's wife was the love of his life, as well as his greatest regret. Since his wife's death, he had abandoned the title of the world's unrivaled expert and retired from the martial world, living in seclusion. For so many years, he had not been able to walk out of the melancholy of the past. He had long been a guest of the heavens, half a step into the ethereal realm, but for the sake of his lover, he was delayed before the rosy clouds. It was because of his wife that Dugu Cho had given up on his future. Although the rumors might not be entirely true, Dugu Chao's feelings were exactly the same. At this moment, when he heard these words, it was like a bolt from the blue, and it directly shocked him to the point his soul shook and his thoughts were in a daze. Gu Chaoyang was almost flung away from the sudden stop. He said in dissatisfaction, "Watch yourself. Are you trying to buy someone's life?" Dugu Cho asked anxiously, "Who is that? Tell me quickly. Who do I need to follow to meet my wife?" Gu Chaoyang said, "That purple jade." Just as he uttered the word, his expression changed drastically as he cried out urgently, "I don't have anything." Boom! Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flashed in the purple sky, descending from the 9 heavens and landing precisely on Gu Chaoyang's head. Gu Chaoyang cried out, his entire body charred and smoke billowing from his orifices. He fainted without moving. What was strange was that Dugu Cho, who was carrying him and coming into close contact with him, was unscathed. In spite of this, Dugu Cho was still frightened by the sudden turn of events. He stopped abruptly and looked up at the sky. Dugu Cho had never respected heaven and earth, nor did he respect spirits and deities. Today was his first time experiencing the might of heaven and earth at such a close distance, but he was instantly filled with awe. The heavens exist. Dugu Cho told himself quietly before he hurriedly began to treat Gu Chaoyang. He could not understand that Gu Chaoyang had guided him to avoid death and revealed the secret of heaven, thus incurring the wrath of heaven. This was undoubtedly a huge favor indeed. "Thank you, brother," Dugu Cho said quietly. "If I can reunite with my late wife one day, I'll never forget your words of gratitude for eternity." The bound of universe. It was quiet and peaceful at first. However, the winds and clouds suddenly changed, and the entire sky abruptly turned pure purple without any warning. Not long after, the entire bound of universe was plunged into an inexplicable atmosphere of shock. Mountains collapsed and the ground cracked, leaving a scene of devastation everywhere. The bound of universe was a plane that was a level higher than the profound sky continent. Not only did it have a territory that far surpassed the profound sky continent, it also had countless inexplicable places, mountains that even the pinnacle experts could not cross. Wait a minute, however, this strange movement actually caused most of the mountains in this world to suddenly collapse, no longer returning to their original appearance. As many mountains collapsed, many volcanoes erupted, snow-capped mountains and avalanches occurred, and rivers, lakes and seas flowed backward, magma gushed out of the ground. In just a short period of time, the bound of universe fell into a state of doomsday. The entire bound of universe was filled with cries of anguish, yet no one knew where this apocalypse had come from. In countless mysterious places, mysterious ancient buildings appeared one after another, as if they were created out of nothing. Then a mountain peak rose from the ground from the east to the west, piercing the sky. At the top of the mountain, a stone tablet suddenly appeared out of nowhere, shining brightly. 8 huge words suddenly appeared on it. Millennium Hegemony, Eternal Evil Technique. It was brilliant and dazzling, shining through the ages. Ever since this stone tablet appeared, no one could get close to it. However, the 8 words could still be seen. With the appearance of the majestic mountain peak, the calamities and tribulations in the bound of universe slowed down abruptly. However, another sentence also appeared in the martial world of the bound of universe. Everyone in the entire Shenhuang world was deep in thought right now. Just what in the world did this mean? Heaven and earth unite, stars gather. The supremacies return, heaven and earth change. At the same time, a majestic palace suddenly appeared in an extremely mysterious place in the bound of universe. The bound of universe had changed. It had only been a day, but the entire bound of universe had undergone an earth-shattering change. The entire bound of universe was upended and shaken. Of course, it did not affect the population too much. After all, most of the major changes happened in the deep mountains and swamps. Those places were all deserted. However, it was also because of this that the people who could sense the change in the atmosphere of the world the most were none other than the top-notch experts of the bound of universe who resided deep in the mountains and swamps. They could clearly sense that the spirit chi in the world seemed to have thickened. And it was getting thicker and thicker? Also, the sky seemed to have become taller than it was before? Such a feeling could not be described with words. In fact, one might not even know if it was an illusion. However, the experts had this mysterious feeling. It was hard to prove, but it was real. Then, the heavens and the earth gave evidence. After that upheaval, there were many changes in this world. For example, all kinds of treasures of heaven and earth seemed to have increased out of thin air. Many rare spiritual materials, spiritual plants, and spiritual items that were rarely seen in hundreds or thousands of years in the past appeared in the world. Although they were not to the extent of becoming common goods, they were no longer rare and hard to find. Also, after the upheaval, many cultivators who were at a bottleneck announced that they had successfully broken through and improved greatly. Moreover, this wave of breakthroughs were all at their fingertips, like a hot knife through butter, with no obstacles at all. Originally, all of this had happened in a subtle manner. If it had happened to an individual, the beneficiary would have felt that they had hit the jackpot and become the main character. Their mood would have been good and their luck would have come. At the very least, it would have been a matter of time before success would have come naturally. Those who kept it a secret all had the same mentality. If they broke through, they would have one more hidden trump card. If they could trick their old rivals at the decisive moment, wouldn't that be the happiest thing in life? Or perhaps they could make those who look down on them look at them in a different light? However, when there were too many such examples, the secret would be revealed by itself. Gradually, it became a state where everyone knew about it, usually at the moment of a decisive battle between two enemies. Haha, you're the one who took the initiative to challenge me. You didn't expect that I've already broken through, did you? See if I don't F***ck you to death. Why are you also F***ck so you've broken through too? I thought that I've improved greatly and broken through. Otherwise, why would I have this challenge? TSK, so you're thinking the same thing? Scenes like this played out continuously. As for those higher-level sects in the bound of universe, they felt a great danger from this change. It was as if a certain layer of the barrier of this world had been opened. The rumors and legends of the martial world had also reached a new height with this upheaval. Now, whoever obtained a 1,000-year-old spiritual material, or a 10,000-year-old spiritual medicine was no longer rare. Whoever broke through and climbed to a higher level was no longer known. Now, the hottest topic, other than the theory of heaven and earth returning to its origin, was all kinds of unimaginable things. For example, someone said solemnly that he saw a magnificent palace floating in the sky. But how could a palace float in the sky? Then, someone said that it was not that rare to see a palace floating in the sky. He even saw a colorful celestial mountain floating in the sky, and it was floating back and forth. Mountains could also float? Floating palaces in the sky, floating celestial mountains? Was this even possible? However, there were many people who testified to such shocking things. They said that they had really seen it and more than one person had seen it. As the saying goes, one can see the general trend from a small clue. The changes caused by the upheaval in the bound of universe this time were too great, too far-reaching. All the cultivators were trying hard, or subconsciously, to adapt to the current changes. Of course, with the changes, a new round of reshuffling was also set off. The entire martial world of the bound of universe was in chaos, and it was a complete mess. In a dense forest somewhere in the Tianshan continent, countless people of the martial world were still fighting for the Dragon Hide treasure map. At present it had reached the final stage, the treasure-snatching game. Chapter 747. The 2 pieces of the Dragon Hide treasure map had fallen into the hands of the phantom swordsman Mu Shixiang. Mu Shixiang was a legendary swordsman who had been in hiding in the martial world for a long time. This person had swept through the world with a ghost sword, unpredictable and indescribably mysterious. No one had ever known when or where his sword would be drawn. The only thing that was known was that once the ghost sword was drawn, someone would definitely turn into a ghost. There had never been an exception. That was why he was called the Phantom Swordsman. His reputation was unparalleled throughout the world. It was until the unrivaled swordsman Jun Moyan came knocking on his door. After hundreds of moves, the Phantom Swordsman was severely injured and had disappeared from the martial world ever since. However, he was the only 2 survivors in Jun Moyan's lifetime of swordsmanship. The other one was Bai Yixue. He was the lucky one who didn't have much skill back then. Now, however, the Phantom Swordsman had reappeared and snatched the treasure map with a single move. The Phantom Swordsman's might had not diminished, he lived up to his reputation. The martial artists who were besieging him had almost given up all hope and were helpless against him. Seeing that the Phantom Swordsman had taken control of the situation and could escape at any time, becoming the final winner of the treasure map battle. As a matter of fact, the Ghost Swordsman had already done so. With his ghost-like movements, he had already drifted more than 50 kilometers away in an instant, and then mysteriously hid himself in a valley. His body kept changing directions, and he finally entered a dense forest after changing directions 17 or 18 times. It was only when he arrived that the Phantom Swordsman heaved a sigh of relief, feeling that he was safe. Lowering his head to look at the treasure map in his hands, he could not help grinning in delight. With this item in hand, he only needed to find a place to cultivate for a few years. So what if he had to go up against Jun Moyan again? He had to avenge himself. By then, the title of unrivaled swordsman or even unrivaled expert would fall on the head of the Phantom Swordsman, Mu Shixiang. Although he had paid the price of a bloody battle today and was severely injured, it was all worth it. It was then that a strange phenomenon appeared. The phenomenon of heaven and earth suddenly appeared, and the color of everything in the surroundings seemed to undergo a strange change. Even the pure purple sky had changed its hue. It was no longer clear. Such a strange scene suddenly appeared in front of the Phantom Swordsman. Mu Shixiang was shocked to see this. He hurriedly looked around and saw the underworld fog rising in the air, covering the sun and the sky. It even covered the purple sky. How could someone as knowledgeable as him not know who was coming? He said in surprise, "Sun Luo?" Before he finished speaking, a sword had already appeared in the air, and an extremely cold voice said, "Let me experience the ghost swordsman's skills." The moment the sword appeared, the heavens and earth froze. A white robe fluttered in the air, the sword light was like a thunderbolt in the clear sky. It was Bai Yixue who had come on his sword. Mu Shixiang snorted coldly, "Bai Yixue, it's you? How can you be my opponent? Do you really think that you can be on par with me just because you survived Jun Moyan's sword?" There was an eerie flash of sword light as the ferocious strike struck Bai Yixue's sword. With a long howl, Bai Yixue retreated and spun in the air before descending once more. Although he had been repelled by Mu Shixiang's strike, he was not severely injured and was still capable of fighting. At this time a low voice spoke faintly, "He's not your opponent? What about me?" The voice was filled with the loneliness of being at the pinnacle. A flash of sword light appeared as the voice spoke. It had just appeared, but it was already at Mu Shixiang's throat. Mu Shixiang was shocked. What a fast sword! Seeing that the killing blow was about to land, the Phantom Swordsman dared not be careless. He retreated swiftly, but Bai Yixue had already descended from the sky to attack again. Mu Shixiang did not panic even when he was ambushed by the 2 men in front of him. As the sword in his hand moved swiftly, the sword light suddenly split into 2 to attack Bai Yixue and the mysterious man. He shouted, "Who are you?" The man and his sword turned into a silhouette that drifted left and right, but the sword light was like a downpour as he replied faintly, The person who will kill you. Facing two attacks at the same time, Mu Shixiang was still a fatigued swordsman despite being a pinnacle swordsman in the world. His body was injured, so he could not help but fall into a disadvantageous position. It was then that a creepy voice rang out, "Ghost door has opened, phantom swordsman, quickly return, quickly." The voice sounded like thousands of ghosts coming out from the netherworld. As the ghostly voice echoed, countless silhouettes appeared. The phantom swordsman was shocked and furious. "It's really you guys." Although the phantom swordsman was at a disadvantage against the joint attack of two experts, he was not hopeless. Even when the mysterious man who came later was a pinnacle expert who was no weaker than him in swordsmanship cultivation base, the phantom swordsman was still confident that he could escape with his life. However, with the sudden appearance of Yama's top 10 experts, the situation took a turn for the worse. The phantom swordsman's defeat was already set in stone. There was no turning back. The phantom swordsman hollered in fury and anxiety, "Hold it!" To Mu Shixiang it was no longer a dangerous situation but a dead end. His only way out was that Bai Yixue and his companion were not on the same side as the concourse of the underworld's assassins. He still had some room to maneuver. In spite of this, how could they slow down when they were all on the same side? It was too late to increase their speed as much as possible, so they all attacked together. With two loud slashes, the phantom swordsman was struck consecutively, two spurts of blood spurting out. Mu Shixiang understood immediately that if he did not hand over the treasure map, he would die for sure. In light of this, he could not help hollering in grief and indignation, "I'll give you the treasure map. Stop." In spite of this, the surrounding attacks did not seem to have any intention of stopping. The murderous intent intensified. Mu Shixiang's thoughts raced as he made a prompt decision. With a shake of his hand, he tossed the dragon-hide treasure map away. Someone flew out swiftly to catch the treasure map. Then flames flashed but they could not burn it. Saber light flashed continuously but they could not destroy it either. It was confirmed that it was indeed the dragon-hide treasure map. After making sure that there was no mistake, he immediately let out a howl that everyone's attacks slowed down. The phantom swordsman, Mu Shixiang, panted heavily and said fiercely, "The treasure map is already in your hands. Do you still want to kill us all?" The 12 of them looked at each other and suddenly laughed. "As you wish, we'll kill them all." Before their words echoed in the air, the 12 of them charged forward once more. However, the attack this time was more than 10 times more intense than before. Shameless, shameless. Facing such an attack, the phantom swordsman, who was already at his wit's end, let out a pained cry as his head flew into the sky. His soul had gone to the underworld just like that. "Let's go," King Qingguang said. The others retreated and turned into a wraith fog, vanishing abruptly. "Bai Yi will discuss this when we get back." Chapter 748. "Bai Yi, are these your friends?" the mysterious man asked. "Yes, master." This mysterious man was Bai Yixue's master, Xiao Shaoqing. Bai Yixue had taken leave from Yunyang and had rushed back to invite his master over. He had been rushing but had unexpectedly encountered the 10 kings of the concourse of the underworld here, catching the tail end of the martial world's catastrophe, the final battle. It's a pity that the treasure map has fallen into the hands of the concourse of the underworld. It will be hard to see it again. Xiao Shaoqing shook his head. It was obvious that Bai Yixue's master had a high opinion of the concourse of the underworld's ability and was self-aware enough not to act recklessly, despite the fact that he was the first to cause Mu Shixiang a crisis and the one who had contributed the most in this battle. "Master, the treasure map is not important at all. What's important is that Grandmaster is still waiting for you there." Bai Yixue pursed his lips, thinking to himself, "Isn't it the same for the 10 kings of the concourse of the underworld to have the treasure map and for me to have it?" However, without young master's permission he really could not say this out loud even to his master. "Forget it, let's go. When your Grandmaster forgives me, it'll be like a rock has landed on the ground. It's indeed more important than the treasure map. Master is wise. I heard that your young master Yun has a fine wine brewed by the god of wine, Feng Xiang'a. Master, you haven't touched a drop of wine for so many years. Why are you drinking today?" "Hey kid, what do you know? Master hasn't drunk wine in all these years mainly because your martial ancestor hasn't forgiven Master. If your martial ancestor forgives Master, Master will naturally be able to taste fine wine again and get drunk." "Huh. There's such a saying. What else? After getting your Grandmaster's forgiveness, your master will definitely get drunk. I might even use the rest of my life to make up for the deficit of these decades. Only then can my life be considered complete." Cough, cough, cough. Tiantang City? The bizarre but extremely dazzling situation was still going on. The purple in the sky seemed to be getting thicker as far as the eye could see. Now, the residence of 9 Supremes had turned into the largest jewel between heaven and earth. It shone brightly, illuminating tens of thousands of miles and bringing color to the universe. The tornado was like a pillar that pierced through heaven and earth. To be more precise, it was a funnel-shaped chimney that sucked in endless spiritual chi and purple chi before disappearing into the residence of 9 Supremes in an endless stream. However, as time went on, Yun-Yang felt more and more tormented. It was difficult for him to cope. Prior to this, he would never have thought that the simultaneous circulation of the 9 Supremes' 9-sex cultivation method would cause such a huge reaction. At this moment, he was completely unaware of what was happening in the outside world. However, he knew everything about his own body. At this moment, he had already watched his muscles slowly swell, slowly increase in size and thickness by several times. In the end, they actually cracked, and his skin and flesh were torn open as they gradually disintegrated. Then, it turned into a drip of recovery, and the body that was repaired became even stronger, as clear as jade, endlessly enduring the endless energy that entered his body like a tsunami. The cycle repeated itself, wave after wave, time after time, round after round. Yun-Yang felt that he could sense every nerve and fiber in his body with inexplicable clarity. Right now, even if it was just a strand of hair that was pulled out, the pain would exceed the pain of a finger that he had originally known. What was more, the process of his body shattering and reassembling like this, then shattering and reassembling again and again, he only had one feeling now, was the entire universe exploding and reassembling in his mind. It was too painful. He wanted to clench his teeth, but he suddenly remembered that his teeth had already been crushed. Although they could grow back stronger teeth, it didn't matter even if he crushed them again. They would still grow back. It was completely useless and it didn't affect the grand scheme of things. Faced with such a situation, Yun-Yang gradually felt that he could not hold on any longer. After all, the current fortuitous encounters they'd encountered couldn't simply be described as cruel. The physical body and spirit were both under pressure, and the benefits of being devastated were also great, shocking, world-shaking, and world-shattering. Yun-Yang's cultivation base was growing at a rapid pace. First, it was the 9 mystical arts. The other 7 cultivation methods that were lagging behind caught up with him like the rising tide of the sea. They all soared to the current cultivation level of wind and cloud, the 6th level with a natural progression. Then, the 9 mystical arts stopped temporarily, turning into the simplest growth of mystical chi cultivation base. From the 7th heaven of Tao realm, it soared straight to the pinnacle of the 7th heaven. Then it was not a bottleneck but a direct breakthrough. It was a breakthrough without any hindrance, like a powerful arrow piercing through a silk cloak, advancing easily. Then it continued to grow at a rapid pace, breaking through the 8th heaven and then the 9th heaven. It was like a hot knife through butter. This round of rapid growth lasted all the way to the pinnacle of the 9th heaven before it stopped abruptly. However, the peak of the 9th level of the Tao realm was almost the peak of the profound sky continent. This kind of advancement, this kind of improvement was not just shocking, it was simply unheard of, it exceeded everyone's knowledge. When the mystical chi cultivation base stopped, the surging pure spiritual chi and innate purple chi locked onto the endless divine art. The endless divine art, which was the hardest for Yun-Yang to improve, grew rapidly with the help of the unparalleled spiritual energy, filling up his meridians in an unprecedented manner. At the same time, the countless karmic chi of gratitude and resentment in this world seemed to have been summoned, surging in. It was as if all the villains the 9 Supremes brothers had killed over the years, including the countless souls they had killed on the battlefield, had turned into the karmic chi and gathered here. All these changes and enhancements caused the endless divine art, which had just leveled up not too long ago, to rise all the way to the pinnacle of the 4th tier. As the endless divine art's level rose, Emmy shrieked in excitement. While Yun-Yang was pleasantly surprised, his vision darkened as his body began the process of collapse and reassembly once more. What changed at the same time was the lotus of endless fate in the space. The 5th lotus leaf grew, swaying and descending upon the world. The 5th tier. The 5th tier of the endless divine art had leveled up. It was a pity that Yun-Yang, who had fallen into a state of complete collapse, was in too much pain. He had no time to check how much he had improved and what benefits he had gained. He had already fainted from the torment of the immense pain. Naturally, he did not know that the endless divine art's improvement did not stop there, but continued to grow, all the way to the pinnacle of the 5th tier. Yun-Yang, who had experienced the torment of his physical body collapsing and reassembling multiple times, was overwhelmed. He gradually could not hold on and was struggling to cope. The veins on his forehead were bulging and his temples were throbbing visibly. If there was a third party by his side, they would inevitably be shocked. If this situation continued, Yun Yang's head might explode at the very next moment. He would die instantly and his Tao would vanish. Although Yun Yang had fallen into a semi-conscious state, his cultivation method did not stop operating on its own. The influx of external energy was far from ending as well. As the energy continued to pour in, Yun Yang's 9 mystical arts that had stopped temporarily began operating once more. This time they advanced simultaneously, soaring to the 7th tier of the 9 incarnations divine art and even breaking through. As if there was some kind of tacit understanding or some kind of special connection, as the 9 incarnations divine art began operating again, his mystical chi cultivation base showed signs of rising again. It was actually a step further than the 9th heaven of the Tao realm. The advancement of the 9 incarnations divine art and the improvement of his mystical chi was a good thing, but Yun Yang was tormented even more during the process of advancement. He was in a coma and waking up again and again, fainting from the pain and waking up from the pain. There was a limit to one's strength. No matter how strong one's willpower was, there would always be a limit. Yun Yang had already reached this limit. A vein on his temple was already bulging as if it could burst out of his head at any time. His eyes were ferocious, the corners of his eyes already torn. Enduring such extreme agony continuously, the endless agony, had given him the urge to end himself, to end all his troubles once and for all. He really could not take it any more. The agony was equivalent to being sliced and diced by thousands of knives and minced into pieces for more than a dozen centuries. He did not know that at the most critical moment, just as his head was about to explode, a silhouette flew into Tiantang City at the speed of light. In the blink of an eye, the person was already high up in the sky beside the residence of 9 Supremes. The moment the silhouette stopped, there was no hesitation at all as he raised his hand. A gush of dazzling purple chi emitted from his hand, letting out a long cry of joy as it entered the thick fog of the residence of 9 Supremes like a swallow returning to its nest. After the transfusion, there was actually a guest in my house. I drank 2 bottles of beer with him. To be honest, regarding the welcoming and sending of guests, I can only say that I'm helpless. My head is about to split open and there's a cotton swab on the needle. I told you to do as you please and I won't drink anymore. I really can't stand it. In the end, I replied on the spot, aren't you going to drink with me now that I'm at your house? I'll leave then. Although I shouldn't have, I really wanted to curse at that moment. I really wanted to say, leave then? But, sigh. Being in the secular world is more out of control than being in the martial world. Chapter 749. In the residence of 9 Supremes, the purple chi that was about to condense into a solid substance rose like an explosion. The pure purple color became even darker at this moment. The heaven and earth quaking that had lasted for a long time suddenly disappeared. Yun Yang was in the most agony, the most critical situation. He was already on the edge of being unable to bear it anymore. Suddenly he felt a jolt in his body. The spiritual chi that came to him on its own was no longer pouring into his body. The changes in his body halted abruptly. He could not help but relax as he exhaled. Then his body tilted and he lay on the ground, unconscious. This time he had truly fainted. It was a completely relaxed coma. Finally, it was over. He would not be woken up by the pain anymore. This was his last thought, his current long-cherished wish. To Yun Yang, there were too many surprises, too many unknowns, and too many things that he did not know. He did not know how long it had taken for him to experience this change. He did not know what kind of impact the shocking changes in the outside world had caused. He did not know what kind of danger he had been in just now. If it were not for someone who had come to his rescue from thousands of miles away and delivered him a life-saving treasure, he would have exploded and died. What's more, he didn't know that the spectacular tornado funnel in the outside world was dissipating bit by bit. The purple gas in the sky was also gradually receding. The purple jade-like sky was also rapidly returning to its original state. The clear sky, the blue sky, and the white clouds were once again. Only the thick fog that remained in the residence of 9 Supremes was spinning rapidly. As it was compressed, it gradually turned into the same thick purple chi. In the residence of 9 Supremes, the doors of the rooms that belonged to the 9 Supremes that were initially shut had all been opened, absorbing the inexplicably thick purple chi in an almost frenzied manner. Stacks of purple cubes slowly appeared on the floor of the 9 rooms. Each of them was only the size of a brick, and they were enshrouded in a dense purple aura. Looking at them, one could tell that they were not ordinary. Gradually, even in the courtyard and the hall, these purple cubes began to form everywhere. That extremely dense and pure spiritual energy was enough to suffocate anyone who took a whiff of it. No matter what, the change of heaven and earth had finally come to an end. It took 3 days and 3 nights. Later on, when Yunyang found out about it, he gave these 3 days and nights a name. He simply named it 3 Lives, 3 Worlds. Purple air comes from the east. There was no doubt that the name was fitting. The time calculation of 3 lifetimes was probably the death of 1,000 cuts a day starting from birth. Even if a lifetime was calculated according to 100 years, Yunyang felt that it might not be able to match the pain he had to go through this time. As for the east-rising purple chi, the sky was purple on that day, and so was the entire residence of 9 Supremes. The residence of 9 Supremes was still surrounded by many people, including the emperor, the civil and military officials, and the martial artists who had stayed here because of the Dragonhide treasure map incident. Gu Chaoyang and Dugucho had rushed back as well. Together with Ling Xiaozue who had arrived earlier, they stood high in the air, observing the residence of 9 Supremes and observing the changes. In these 3 days, Yunyang had experienced 3 lifetimes and countless metamorphoses and improvements, but the ones who had benefited the most were the 3 of them. Ling Xiaozue was the first. Ling Xiaozue had given his all that he had that day, even urging a considerable amount of life force, to rush to the residence of 9 Supremes in Tiantang City. He had sent the purple jade flute into it and put an end to the incident, but he had also benefited tremendously from it. The residence of 9 Supremes' innate purple chi seemed to know that Ling Xiaozue was the key to this incident, so it had given him a portion of it. With Ling Xiaozue's cultivation base and experience, how could he not know that this was an opportunity of a lifetime? He absorbed it at once and cultivated with the help of the spiritual chi atmosphere that was at least 100 times more than usual. Dugucho and Gu Chaoyang, who had followed closely behind, closed their eyes to cultivate as well, healing their wounds and improving their cultivation base. After all, such an opportunity was a great opportunity that might not even come by once in 1,000 years. There would be time for them to talk and talk. After this fruitless pursuit and sneak attack, as well as the continuous pursuit and ambushes, the 3 of them felt suffocated and angry. They also deeply understood that their cultivation might not be the peak of this world, and that there was no one who could fight against them anymore. After 3 days and 3 nights of focused cultivation, the 3 of them could feel that their cultivation base had increased by at least a level compared to before. Ling Xiaozue was the one with the greatest improvement among the 3 of them. He could be said to have advanced a step further and was once again the unrivaled expert of this world. He was even more deserving of the title. When they felt that the density of the spiritual chi was gradually dissipating and that there was not much meaning in continuing to cultivate, the 3 of them opened their eyes at the same time. However, when they looked at the massive residence of 9 Supremes in front of them again, the 3 of them were overwhelmed with an indescribable feeling. If the entire continent was a crown, then the residence of 9 Supremes should be the most dazzling pearl embedded on the crown. There was no doubt that it was irreplaceable. Far away the wind and clouds surged and howled. An overwhelming murderous aura came from afar, exuding a sense of unbridled savagery. The 3 of them lifted their heads at the same time, gazing into the distance. They were very familiar with this aura. At least, they were very familiar with it during this period of time, the kind of familiarity that they had come into contact with personally. Their old rivals had arrived. The 4 Seasons Towers experts had arrived. Although they had suffered 2 defeats in succession, the 3 of them were not afraid in the slightest. The terrifying aura stopped far away and did not continue to approach. There were a total of 18 people from the 4 Seasons Tower who had come this time. All of them appeared above the clouds far away, hidden in the mist and looking over with complicated gazes. They seemed to be discussing something and did not launch an attack immediately. The residence of 9 Supremes below was still exuding a thick purple chi, still radiating a radiant glow that illuminated the sky and earth. After a moment of stalemate, a silhouette emerged from among the 18 people. His aura was like a startling rainbow as he hovered above the residence of 9 Supremes, smiling faintly as he said, "The 3 of you please." Ling Xiaozue nodded faintly and said, "Liang Canghai, I didn't expect you to still be alive." The person who had come was the masked man in black, Liang Canghai, who had attended the meeting the other day. This person was also one of the most commonly seen substitutes of the 4 Seasons Tower's Mr. Nian. In the last ambush, Liang Canghai's injuries were almost fatal. Unexpectedly, he had appeared here unscathed, which was unexpected. Chapter 750. Liang Canghai's eyes stared at Ling Xiaozui for a moment before he turned to look at Duguqiu and then at Gu Chaoyang. His gaze was filled with extreme hatred as he sucked in a deep breath and said, "I'll have to repay the three of you for your great kindness before we can talk about whether I should die or not." Gu Chaoyang sneered and said, "Why are there three of you? There should be four of you. Have you forgotten that it was Feng Xiang'e who caused your defeat and death that day? He was the one who contributed the most in that battle. If we're your great benefactor, what about him? How are you going to be grateful, to cry tears of gratitude and prostrate yourself before him?" Liang Canghai remained unfazed as he said with a smile, "Brother Gu, an honest man will not resort to insinuations. Is there any meaning to me with your shallow sowing of discord? Compared to me, I'd like to ask the three of you to tell me how it feels to be led by the nose like walking a dog, led here and there. How do you feel? I believe that after this experience, the three of you should understand that a man's strength is limited. Being the best and invincible in the world doesn't mean that you're truly invincible and number one, right?" Duguqiu said coldly, "No matter how many twists and turns there are, at least we're unscathed until now. On the other hand, does the Four Seasons Tower really have it easy? Ignorant and arrogant like a frog in a well." Liang Canghai guffawed and said, "Even if we're ignorant and arrogant, so what? After all, we've toyed with Ling Xiaozui and Duguqiu, two unrivaled experts in the world as well as Heaven's Inquisition who claims to be a fortune-teller. We've toyed with them more than once. At least we think it's worth it." He guffawed and said in an extremely arrogant manner, "It's worth it." Duguqiu's hand slowly pressed on the hilt of his sword, the rage within him rising to its peak. In his eyes, sword light flickered and sword intent soared. Gu Chaoyang coughed and said, "Liang Canghai, you managed to avoid death and prolong your life when you were in a certain death situation that day. It's a testament to your extraordinary luck. However, since you've come here with your true appearance today, I've performed a divination for you out of my curiosity. Are you interested to hear it?" Liang Canghai said mockingly, "Could it be that the heavenly fortune-teller has seen some great change again? But why have I heard that the heavenly fortune-teller's divination is a secret of the heavens that cannot be revealed? If it could be easily announced, how could it be considered a heavenly secret?" Gu Chaoyang guffawed. "It is indeed a taboo for fortune-tellers that God's secrets cannot be revealed. However, there is an exception, when the target has been illuminated by the star of death and is on the brink of death. There is no solution whether the God's secrets are revealed or not. You're facing such a bloody disaster right now. This is where you'll fall. What's more, today is the day you, Liang Canghai, return to heaven." Liang Canghai laughed aloud. "A bloody calamity? Land of the fallen? The time to return to heaven? With just the three of you?" Gu Chaoyang was still guffawing. After some time he shook his head and said, "All of us intend to take your life, but it's destined that it won't be any of us who will kill you. Don't worry, you're dead today. You must die." Liang Canghai sneered and said, all right. Gu Chaoyang, I'd like to see how your heavenly fortune-teller will come true. Who else other than the three of you dares to lay a hand on me?" "Ha ha." Before his words echoed in the air, he spun and soared into the sky. A ray of light flew out from his hand and turned into a shocking thunderbolt in the blink of an eye. With an ear-piercing shriek, it fell from the sky with an intimidating aura. The target of Liang Canghai's attack was the residence of 9 Supremes below. Ling Xiaozui and the other two could see it clearly. Liang Canghai was not using the heaven measuring ruler that he was used to, but a gigantic hammer that weighed at least several thousand caddies. At their level of ability, it was no longer a problem for them to move something that weighed several thousand caddies or even tens of thousands of caddies. However, famous experts would always be more mindful of their own status and reputation. In addition, a profound cultivator could turn any plant, wood, bamboo, or rock into a lethal weapon when infused with mystical qi. It was rare to see such a gigantic weapon as a weapon. What was rare was that the gigantic hammer in the hands of a peerless expert like Liang Canghai, who had infused his mystical qi to its limit, was like a meteor falling from the sky. His power was unstoppable. At least, there was hardly anyone in this world who could face it head-on. Any expert would have to evade it, unable to face it head-on. Even if Ling Xiaozui and the other two wanted to stop it, it was already too late. After all, Liang Canghai was still hundreds of feet away from them. It was already beyond their reach. The moment Liang Canghai swung his giant hammer, he knew that he had succeeded. His body floated up into the air as he laughed heartily. Today's fun is over. Three old friends, how about we meet again in the pugilistic world? His voice was still ringing in their ears, but he was already retreating hastily. When Ling Xiaozui and the other two men saw that the situation had taken a sudden turn for the worse, they were no longer in the mood to entertain Liang Canghai. Instead, they focused their attention on the outcome of the giant hammer striking the residence of Nine Supremes. Accompanied by the sound of the void being torn apart, the gigantic hammer smashed into the residence of Nine Supremes that was still shrouded in purple light with a terrifying force. It was obvious that this was the Four Seasons Tower's test of the residence of Nine Supremes. Back then, Gu Chaoyang had asked Ling Xiaozui to deliver the purple jade flute even if he had to risk his life. This had made Mr. Nian, who had disguised himself as Feng Xiang'e, feel a sense of foreboding. He had not hesitated to destroy his plan and expose his identity just to interfere. It was a pity that he had gone for wool and come home shorn. Not only did he fail to snatch the purple jade flute, he had also paid a heavy price. Even after he had returned, he was still indignant and had sent his men here immediately to test the waters. This was the main reason the 18 pinnacle experts of the Four Seasons Tower had come together. They were not here for Ling Xiaozui and the other two. Those who were observant could easily deduce one thing. The residence of Nine Supremes was either at its strongest or at its weakest at this moment. Why would a top-notch expert in the martial world usually find someone to guard him when he was breaking through? It was because that was when he was at his strongest, but it was also when he was at his weakest and most defenseless. It was just a test and the hindrance was limited. However, if the residence of Nine Supremes happened to be at its weakest, the strike could possibly destroy the entire residence of Nine Supremes, or even destroy Supreme Cloud entirely, eliminating the threat once and for all. That was why Liang Canghai had come. Therefore he had executed the tyrannical slayer and hurled the hammer, but he had retreated at the same time without stopping. This was the way to protect himself. Right before everyone's eyes, the gigantic hammer slammed into the residence of Nine Supremes with a shrill whistle. However, the deafening explosion that everyone had expected did not come, nor did there be a huge impact or tremor. It was like a leaf or a piece of cotton that had fallen into the residence of Nine Supremes. It did not cause the slightest impact, so naturally there was no sound at all. Chapter 751. In spite of this, it was an extremely abnormal situation. The gigantic hammer that weighed thousands of caddies had been thrown down by Liang Canghai, an expert who was almost at the pinnacle of this world. The force, the inertia, and the power of the hammer had to be at least hundreds of thousands of caddies of impact, no matter how conservative the estimation was. Logically speaking, the whole of Tiantang City would have been shaken by the impact if it had taken the brunt of the impact. Why was there no sound or reaction at all? Gu Chaoyang watched Liang Canghai, who was retreating in a carefree manner. His gaze was filled with mockery as he said faintly, "Committing suicide. Liang Canghai is doomed." Ling Xiaozui was surprised. "Committing suicide? How so?" Gu Chaoyang nodded slowly and said, "What I said just now was the truth. I really read his physiognomy just now before I spoke of it. He is indeed facing a bloody calamity today. Today he will definitely fall. There is no chance of survival." Dugu Chou and Ling Xiaozui's eyes widened at once. They stared at Liang Canghai, who was flying back in a carefree manner, and murmured, This doesn't look like he's going to fall." "Committing suicide? How does he commit suicide?" *CK. The expletives came from the two peerless experts in unison. Their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets at the same time. The purple light of the residence of Nine Supremes rippled, and then, a giant hammer flew out of the purple light, wobbling as it soared 1,000 feet into the air. With a swoosh, it chased after Liang Canghai. The speed made even an expert like Ling Xiaozui feel his scalp tingle. This was because, just as they saw the hammer fly out, Liang Canghai's head, who was retreating, had already burst open with a loud crack. His body was still flying back in a carefree manner, but his head was already gone. The giant hammer came to a sudden stop when it hit Liang Canghai's headless corpse and fell with a loud boom. Ling Xiaozui and the others had seen the hammer fly. Liang Canghai, who was flying backward, should not have seen it. In fact, he had seen it clearly, saw the hammer chasing after him, but he could not react in time and was easily killed by the hammer. Committing suicide, it was truly committing suicide. Liang Canghai, the pinnacle expert of his generation, the renowned boundless golden gleam, had died here without a reason. Until his death, he was still showing off his prowess and in high spirits. Until his head was smashed into pieces, he was still elegant, confident, and proud of himself. On the opposite side, the 17 men from the Four Seasons Tower were visibly stirred. A few gasps could be vaguely heard coming from the other side. Despite the unexpected turn, two silhouettes moved swiftly like lightning to catch Liang Canghai's headless corpse. However, Ling Xiaozue could clearly see the trembling of the other party, bewildered by the current situation. It was only then that the giant hammer landed on the ground with a deafening thud. The ground shook and the entire Tiantang city shook thrice. The two men turned their heads in the air, their gazes directed straight at Gu Chaoyang. Although they were far apart and it was difficult for them to inflict any actual damage, the chilliness in their eyes was not concealed at all. It was filled with murderous intent. The two men turned to look at Gu Chaoyang from the air. Although they were far apart and it was difficult for them to inflict any actual damage, the chilliness in their eyes was not concealed at all. How can I be blamed? As the saying goes, heaven's wrongs can be avoided, but one's own wrongs can't be avoided. Previously, I revealed the heavenly secret and told him that a bloody calamity was about to befall him, but he didn't take it seriously. Naturally, he asked for it, so how can I be blamed? Do you really think that I, Heaven's Inquisition, am a fraud? A clear voice spoke from the other side. Heaven's Inquisition is indeed unpredictable and has the ability to pry into Heaven's will. Now that I've met you, I'm even more impressed than the rumors. Gu Chaoyang said mockingly, he's just a cannon fodder that you've pushed out to test the waters. What's the point of putting on an act? It's disgusting. If you really think of him as a brother, why didn't you come to test the residents of Nine Supremes on his behalf? On the other side, a few people snorted angrily. One by one they pressed their hands on their weapons ready to strike. Gu Chaoyang was still nonchalant as he guffawed, you've scared me to death. You Four Seasons Tower people are amazing indeed. Since you're so loving and brotherly, aren't you going to avenge Liang Canghai now that he's dead? Let's fight together. The one who killed Liang Canghai is the residents of Nine Supremes before us. Go over and avenge him. What's the point of putting on an act over there? A real fight is what matters, do you understand? Gu Chaoyang spat and said in disdain, you're the pinnacle of this world to dare touch the residents of Nine Supremes. Otherwise you're just a bunch of cowardly bandits. No matter how high your cultivation base is, you're still a bunch of scoundrels. Ling Xiaozue guffawed. Oh Gu, you're right. Not bad, not bad. Those who dare not avenge their brothers are scoundrels no matter how high their cultivation base is. On the other side, the 17 men from the Four Seasons Tower were glaring at the trio. Their murderous intent was accumulating like a flood that had been locked for a long time. Once it was released, it would be unstoppable and unstoppable. In spite of this, Ling Xiaozue and the other two men were fearless. They continued to taunt and laugh, obviously trying to infuriate them to death. At least I still had a clear mind. That purple jade flute is not ordinary. After that, the purple jade flute gave me an inheritance. Yes, it was the cultivation technique that I had been cultivating for my entire life. That voice didn't end things after giving me the cultivation technique. Instead, it guided me in detail on how to cultivate it. That 1 month of teaching was an eye-opener. However, a month later, the voice told me that my aptitude was too lacking to inherit its legacy. However, what I had grasped in that 1 month was enough for me to roam the martial world and create a legend. Then, it made me promise solemnly that one day in the future, when I had completed a task, someone would come to inherit the cultivation method that I had learned. By then, there would be hope for my cultivation path to progress further and I would be one step closer to the ninth heaven. Cultivation method? One step closer to the ninth heaven? Dugucho asked sensitively. Yes, this is where I came from. It's just that I can't tell you the name of the cultivation method, Gu Chaoyang said apologetically. Of course. Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho expressed their understanding. We're more interested to know what the voice entrusted you with now. There are 2 tasks that were entrusted to me. The first is to return the purple jade flute when the time comes. Gu Chaoyang said, I've already accomplished this task. It's a pity that I'm not returning it personally. If I were to return it personally, all the benefits outside of the residence of Nine Supremes should belong to me alone. Gu Chaoyang's expression was one of regret. Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho chuckled sheepishly. Indeed, this should have been Gu Chaoyang's opportunity, but it had been shared among the 3 of them. Dugucho asked with interest, what about the second task? Is it related to the step closer to the ninth heaven that you mentioned just now? Gu Chaoyang answered, maybe it's related. The second thing is for me to assist someone in secret. I've told you all my biggest secrets. I have to bid farewell to both of you now. We shall meet again if fate wills it. A thoughtful look flashed across Ling Xiaozue and Du Guchao's eyes at the same time before it turned into gratitude. The information that Gu Chaoyang had revealed to both of them was too important. Farewell? Where are you going? Asked Ling Xiaozue. Tianxuan's worldly affairs are done. I'm going to the bound of universe to wait for the next opportunity. Gu Chaoyang smiled and said, now that things have come to this, Tianxuan's situation is set in stone. There's no room for change. Even if there are still twists and turns, it's destined that it won't take too long. Perhaps both brothers should plan ahead. The bound of universe, Du Guchao said. Exchanging a glance with Ling Xiaozue, he said, back then I actually had the chance to enter the bound of universe, but I gave it up. What? Gu Chaoyang blurted out the question, but he already understood the situation. Back then, he had been delayed by the rosy clouds for the sake of his lover. This was probably the reason. I'm afraid that my wife's soul will be lonely. I've decided to accompany her for 500 years. Du Guchao chuckled humorlessly and sighed softly. Gu Chaoyang and Ling Xiaozue sighed as they exchanged glances. Everyone in the world knew about Du Guchao's infatuation. Even after hundreds of years had passed and hundreds of seasons had passed, his infatuation remained the same. Such a man who was devoted to his love was absolutely worthy of anyone's admiration in this world and would make any man feel ashamed. The bound of universe is not completely unfamiliar to me. However, I want to accumulate more confidence for myself before I go. Even though the incident this time has allowed me to take another step forward, this improvement came too abruptly. I have to make it my own before I can talk about the future. Ling Xiaozue chuckled dryly and said, the bound of universe is a great world, its level even higher than Tianxian. Experts are plentiful, skilled cultivators and exceptional characters can be found everywhere. While we're all mighty in Tianxian continent, if we go to the bound of universe, even if we're not ordinary martial world nobodies, we won't be at the pinnacle of this world. It's better to plan for ourselves. Du Guchao nodded in agreement, because what Ling Xiaozue was thinking was exactly what he was thinking. Gu Chaoyang looked at one and the other and said with a smile, what was our initial intention when we first entered the martial world? Don't we have the courage to start all over again when we go to the bound of universe? So what if we can't return to our peak? The two of them suddenly trembled, both of them were moved by these words. I'll go to the bound of universe first and wait for you two brothers to come. Gu Chaoyang smiled. When the time comes. He laughed heartily, turned around and drifted away. He didn't even finish his sentence before he left. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.